Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show here on the line. We're ready. We're ready to take some phone calls. We're ready to talk to some people. That's what we're here for. I am Luxander, hosting for you today, and joining me is Josie Caballero. How are you, Josie? How you doing?
I am surviving, I guess. No, I've just been so swamped with all of the things that I do. Like right now, I'm earning every title that I have. Like, like
Yeah, getting the work
it
done.
is getting the work done.
Hmm.
I always joke that I have like all of these titles: commissioner, vice president, director, and it's like, yeah, they're more than titles. They're actually a lot of work. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It turns
yeah,
out a lot is
yeah.
required of us in this time.
And it is testing me right now.
Yes. Yes. If for any reason any of you here are unfamiliar, this is the Transatlantic Call-In Show. So we are trans, and that's kind of why we're being taxed in a particular way by everything that's going on right now. So the premise of the show, call in, talk to us. We're trans. We'll answer your questions. Whether you're oppositional or whether you are friendly, whether you need to hone your arguments or whether you need a little bit of reassurance in this time, we are taking calls. Numbers at the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288. We still have open lines. Um, as usual, we love taking those oppositional calls, but we will accept you even if you are not here to be annoying. If you are going to be annoying in the chat, though, call in because we enjoy a little bit of arguing. So anyway, with all that said, let's take a quick look at last week's poll, and we'll read out this week's poll. I was here last week, so I don't really want to weigh in too much on this one. But Josie, you didn't get a chance to talk about the lavender scare. Can you tell us what you know about the lavender scare?
Yes. Really just pulling out my it's like, all right, Josie, do you know your gender history? Do you know your
Yeah,
your
true.
yeah,
Because a lot of people in our audience don't
pop
know about this.
quiz.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
literally fully three
absolutely.
quarters of our audience who responded said no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, essentially, what the lavender scare was essentially the fear and of lesbians, also the fact that you had trans women in particular that were getting harassed, fired from their jobs, and I believe it also affected queer, just gay men too, right? I believe
and
I'm trying to
lesbians, yeah,
and
yeah, it was
lesbians
all,
mainly.
yeah.
Yeah, it was like all queerness, and essentially the reason we call it the lavender scare is very similar to the red scare. The red scare, if you were suspected as a communist, report on that person, and then that person can lose their job, lose their standing with their communities. So it was essentially the same thing, but the queer version. So institutions were after you, the police were observing you. If you were in the military, you were done for. They would basically kick you out immediately. And yeah, it was a very scary time of surveillance from not just average citizens, but the institutions that run this country.
Yeah, and it was I think that we can kind of say there's a historical through line where this policy, I mean, insofar as it wasn't really an explicit policy so much as like, you know, we're just going to say you shouldn't be gay if you're in the military or whatever, but this is kind of where we end up with don't ask, don't tell eventually later on. And, I've read stories about, certain aspects of the military where they were saying root out all of the lesbians, and then the like person in charge of that area was like, yo, by the way, if I crack down on lesbians, you will not have any more secretaries or nurses. So maybe chill out. And then that's where the kind of overall treatment of gayness in the military starts from this like, well, if you pretend like you're not gay, we'll pretend like we don't know. So yeah, it's just interesting looking at the last century of history regarding queer people and seeing how those things tie back in. And of course, we talked about it on this show because about 100 intelligence officers were purged because of allegedly, sexually explicit messages when it was really stuff like trans women talking about their lives after surgery and how recovery has gone and things like this. So we're seeing another kind of similar thing of purging LGBTQ members of public service, whether that's the military, whether that's federal employees, whether that's highly skilled intelligence officers. So yeah, we talked about that last week though. This week we are going to have a different discussion, and we're just going to talk about the poll right now, and we'll give you guys a version of the poll to vote on here in the chat as well. If you want to make any further comments about why you voted that way, check out the community tab, and we will come back to this question and give our opinions here in a few minutes. But we want to ask you, is a trans person committing material fraud by using a different gender marker than the one they were assigned at birth? There is a reason we're talking about this. It's not a loaded question, I promise you. It's directly related to the news. So get your votes in here on the community tab and in the chat, and we'll come back around to it in a few minutes. With that said, are we ready to start taking calls?
I am. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. Do you have any strong opinions, or do we want to just kind of take them in order for now?
Let's go ahead and go with order for now.
Okay. So we are going to start with Mila, she, her, from Colorado, who wants to ask, what is a woman and also what is a person, in response to people like Matt Walsh. Mila, am I pronouncing your name right? Hello, you're on with us on the line. How's it going?
Hi, it's going good. Thanks for asking. How are you guys?
Surviving. Yeah.
Surviving. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What did you want to talk about today?
You. So I was hoping to start with a quote from one of my favorite movies, Sucker Punch. I promise it's super relevant to the question that I'm asking.
Go for it.
So the quote comes. Okay, cool. So at the end of this movie, I'm not going to regurgitate the whole plot, right? But at the end of the movie, there's basically a scene that was actually only in the director's cut, and there's a quote in there that I think is very relevant to what I wanted to discuss today, and that is, "I might have your body, but the real you, that intangible and undefinable spark that is you, well, that you I will never know." That is said in the context of a man essentially. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to talk about, right? But the themes are like bodily autonomy, sex trafficking. Tell me if I'm there's certain things I'm not allowed to discuss, right? Like for whatever reason. But basically, it has nothing to do with trans people, right? It's set in the context of a man who's basically trying to say, yeah, I'm in a position of power. I can have your body, but I don't just want to control your body. I also want to control who you are. I want you to give yourself to me willingly. And to me, I think that highlights a very important distinction in how trans exclusionists tend to characterize trans people as delusional, because they frame the disagreement about the definition of the word woman, when I think in actuality the definition we're disagreeing about is the definition of the word I. What is when they ask what is a woman, I think what most trans people are probably thinking are what is a person? Can a person be a man? Can a person be a woman? Or is a person just a set, or are we just a set of parts? Are bodies the only thing that are men or women? Or is a woman an object? Is a woman a person? So that's kind of the topic I wanted to talk about today.
Sure. I think it's a really interesting question. So basically, just to summarize and make sure I understand where you're coming from, basically, when someone says, I am a woman, the quibble that seems to be arising is on how we define, what a person is. Because I think that so often in this conversation, people, when people ask me, so is there a version of the future where people just go by a pronoun that refers to their biological sex? Like this idea that we would do away with a separate construct. Truly, if there were no such thing as gender stereotypes, truly, why would it make a difference if we just used pronouns that refer to biological sex? And to me, that's a biological essentialist argument where it's still saying you are primarily defined by your physical body. And this seems to be the way that many people view what sex and gender are, like that it is something about like your body externally that has nothing to do with the I that we typically use to describe like our emergent consciousness and how we experience the world through our senses, but that I think a lot of trans people would say we are not defined by our senses or our physicality. Like we, in fact, take charge and change those things to be in alignment with like the person that we are, really, if that is kind of hitting on what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's not to say that the body isn't real or that the body is meaningless. And it's just to say that the body isn't the totality of who we are. And you could argue that like who we truly are deep down is also a part of the body, right? It's rooted in cognition, it's rooted in neurological patterns and how our brain is wired, and we can get really deep into the science of how those wiring patterns tend to be optimized for reproductive function, which we tend to observe an alignment in trans people's neurology. But, I tend to go really deep into the science. I have a background in genetics. Evolutionary neurology, basically how the central nervous system formed. But I think a lot of that goes over people's head because the conversation isn't really about science. It's about a dogma that says what you're born as, you die as. I think if a trans person was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, that's where I was gonna go, right? Very,
Hmm.
very, very rarely does a person who is going to say the what is a woman in, I guess, an unironic way, does it go into this deep philosophical discussion. And so really in my conversations that I have with people who legitimately ask this question as a person that's trying to gotcha type of situation or things like that, is I actually try to pull it back further and be like, okay, before we get into what is a woman, we have to define like the parameters of where we're coming from. So for example, when I'm having these conversations, and I've had many of these conversations on this show actually, is really going back, like, do you believe that there's a difference between sex and gender? Because if they say yes,
Or
they
a person in a
do.
body.
Yeah, again, but that's for me, it's like I want to go even more rudimentary, right? I guess a person in a
Hmm.
body, again, in my mind, is essentially like, once we go down that road, it also can open up into another can of worms of like the metaphysical of like, are we connected to our consciousness? Is our consciousness connected to our body? So for me, I think about what they're trying to do mainly is they're trying to divert you into this circular reasoning and circular argument, because they say, well, a woman is a person who identifies as a woman. Oh my God, that's circular. That doesn't make any sense. Definitionally, blah, 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 blah. And
Right.
essentially what you, yeah, right. And essentially what you got to do is you have to set the parameters of the question. So essentially the way I've had it in this conversation, I'll be quick, is that if you believe that there's a difference between sex and gender, then you would believe, and I use this argument a lot, and in fact we made mugs about it, if some trees have if some coconut trees have coconuts and some coconut trees don't, and if they agree to that statement, then I go, well, some women have penises and some women don't, meaning the, like, in the comparison, a tree is the person, and or the woman portion, and the coconuts are the sex portion. So the gender is the tree, the nuts are the sex of this tree at this point in this analogy that I do. Then people are like,
Mhm.
okay, so then I further the question further is like, so that is a black woman, a blonde woman, a cis woman, and a trans woman, are they all in the category of woman? so
So they
so
all
if they
share something in
say,
common.
right, because it's that woman. And so if they're all considered a type of woman, then at that point, then I can answer the question of what is a woman, right? A woman is someone who fits categorically in that sense of the woman, I guess, the category, how we're categorizing the people who identify as women. So when you do it that way, it gives more context than, what they're going to try to say is biological female, because that again is not separating sex and gender. So I try to walk them through that, and we've had people go all the way up to the waterline with me, and then immediately at
Mhm.
that last question is like, no, there isn't a difference. And it's like, okay, so you don't believe there's a difference between sex and gender? And they're like, no, there is. And then the conversation starts to stall and then kind of fizzle
Mhm.
out over and over. And so that's kind of the way I usually take that question, because there is
Mhm.
no quick definitional answer to what is a woman. Even the Webster's dictionary doesn't have just one definition either. So yeah,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. So I mean, my, I guess, version of a quick definitional answer would be like, a woman is a person that's distinct from a man. Like, and that goes to the root of how we categorize all things, right? Like, things belong in a category when they're distinct from a different category. Um, and often like something I'll hear, right, is like, if you paint a gold rock, or if you take a rock and you paint it gold, that doesn't make it gold, right?
Mm.
Which again, I think mischaracterizes the position that trans people are coming from, obviously. But the reality is, like, if you paint a rock gold, it doesn't become gold. But if you change the number of if you change the number of protons in the nucleus of the atom, by definition, it becomes gold. I mean, we do this in particle accelerators and nuclear physics all the time. Um, I and I agree that like there is like an important difference between sex and gender, and I think both of these things can like work together. Both the distinction between sex and gender and like the biological reality of I think what I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but what the other host was talking about as far as like seeking alignment. I come into this with kind of an unique perspective, being intersex, having Baylor-Chappelle syndrome. I was born with male reproductive biology, but two X chromosomes, and neurological function, which is you know every single part of the human body, like is adapted to align with your reproductive strategy, whether you're looking at like bone structure, reproductive system, cognitive patterns. So the point of me bringing that up is to say that, yes, there is a difference between sex and gender, but I think how we arrive at our gender is very much related to biological sex. It's just not a part of biological sex that we can see as easily. But just because we can't see someone's neurology doesn't mean that it isn't real. Just because someone can't see the part of my biology that is more aligned with female biology doesn't mean that that isn't real. It's just harder to observe than someone's genitals or someone's bone structure. And I, I don't disagree that there is a difference between sex and gender. I just think that we should more emphasize, I want to emphasize the distinction that like our gender is also a part of how our body develops sexually, as far as like biological sex is concerned.
I guess this is where I will disagree, because this is where, because I look at it through the social ramifications and the political angle of people's rights,
Mm-hmm.
and how we legislate, and for me right now, because we can't prove that to be so, it's hard to say this is what is so. Like, for example, I always use the idea of consciousness. Like, we can't identify and find consciousness in a human brain, for example, yet we know it's there because we can measure it and understand it, but yet we can't point to where it comes from and what it is, right? A person who is
Mm-hmm.
metaphysical would believe that's the soul, the consciousness is the soul, but that's just another word that we describe for consciousness, is which is something we can't point to in the brain. I also feel the same way about gender. Gender may be in our brain somewhere, but we can't point to it. And so for me, I
Yes.
look at it as a part of the social construction of it is a much more important point of view, in my opinion. And I think the separation of the distinction is what is going to allow humans to be able to, have rights in this country. Because the moment we start intentionally or unintentionally start trying to conflate gender and sex, even in the philosophical way that you are trying to paint it, is always going to make laws easier to pass against us, because they're like, no, gender is based on biology because of XYZ, so therefore we have to use this determinant, and since gender is somewhat linked to sex, therefore we can now legislate as sex alone, because it's just cleaner and easier that way. Because if you create a distinction of difference within the law, right, and I'm going into policy, right, if we make a distinction amongst the law between sex and gender, and create a strong difference between the two things, then we can legislate and protect for people who have the gender identity versus the sex identity, or the sex definition of what the they were born with. Because I feel the conflation of both in any way, even in a philosophical lens, gives just enough distance between the people who are trying to legislate against our existence to say, no, they're somewhat linked, so why would we create a differentiation between the two and treat either in the law differently? And that's kind of where I come from as a policymaker's point of view. Does that make sense?
And it does, and I don't disagree at all with that distinction. I think it does bring up a really good point, right? Sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I think what I wanted to where was I going with that? I'm sorry, I'm like on the spot.
It's okay.
No. So right. So I'm not like saying that sex and gender. Here's my perspective, right? Let's look at it from the example of like sexuality, right? One could argue that sexuality is a choice, and obviously gay people, lesbian people have for a long time said, like,
one could
being gay isn't
argue
a
it,
choice.
but we know that's not true. I mean,
Of course.
I don't know. I don't even know if we can good faith argue that.
Hear me out. I promise. This is
okay.
So let's say that people choose to explore their sexuality. So, like, in the sense that a bisexual person can choose, right, to be can choose to get gay married, right? From a policy distinction, we don't, just because we acknowledge that some people don't choose to be gay, right, doesn't mean that we don't say that someone can be entitled to the choice to enter into a gay relationship or a gay marriage, and they deserve the same legal protections that someone who didn't quote unquote choose it. Now, obviously, they're not choosing to be bisexual, but the reason I'm kind of relating it to this is because I think there are people that choose to explore their gender expression, choose to explore their how they categorize themselves, and that's real and that's valid. And I wouldn't take that choice away from people. At the same time, I think there are people that don't choose their gender, don't choose their how they align cognitively and neurologically with biological sex. And the reason I don't disagree with you is because I think both of these things can be true at the same time, where we have people that are born gay or are born with neurology that is incongruent with their sexual development, which is how I would categorize someone like me. And at the same time, there can be people that have the right to define gender the way that they choose to, define what a man is, what a woman is to themselves, and whether or not they want to medically transition, whether or not they want to, achieve the highest degree of alignment possible. I think both of these things can be true, but it's important not to leave anyone out of that conversation, including the people that maybe enter into the community through more of like a gender fluid, like social interpretation, but also people that experience being trans in the form of like a medical condition or sexual misalignment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is sort of touching on like a couple of different things because there is this I was born this way thing that we tend to do where it's like this is an intrinsic trait. And sometimes people take that to a semi sort of transmedicalist place of and I'm not saying that you're doing this. I'm just speaking about like this exists in the context of a broader
Oh,
discussion that
I
has been
understand. Yeah.
yeah, for a while. So yeah, like the idea kind of that like it's something about your brain or like it's something about, the hormones that you were exposed to in utero or whatever. And then there is kind of, I think, an expanding conversation because that has been the normative, like mainstream position for a long time. This idea that it's a medical condition and it's defined by, need to access medicine. And like that's
Which
kind of
isn't
how
my
that has
position,
been the
just to
dominant.
clarify.
Right. Yeah. 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 And then a very new thing that we're kind of doing as a movement is trying to create a distinction now where it's like, regardless of whether this is biological, people should have the freedom to choose, which is kind of why we come back to the bodily autonomy thing in the title of the show today,
Hmm.
because it's like, regardless of whether you have an intrinsic trait, you should still have the freedom to choose to alter your body or choose to dress a different way or whatever. And so it's like,
Hmm.
it's an attempt in some ways to create like a hierarchy. And some people will, if they're like, oh, I'm waiting a really long time on a surgery wait list. And so I think because I'm like suicidally dysphoric, that it's not fair somehow that someone who just feels euphoric is going to get this surgery before me because their insurance just happened to get figured out before mine did, or something along those lines.
Hmm.
Because yeah, it's like it becomes a question of like who deserves access. This is part of why I don't like the medicalization of transness because then you have a bunch of external gatekeeping processes saying like, well, if you're not suicidally dysphoric, then you don't deserve this. Like I know somebody in New Zealand who was not able to get top surgery through the NHS there because uh, they had the highest level of distress mentally, but they're very skinny and therefore didn't have any of the like physical pain stuff. And so they
Hmm.
were just like, we're just not going to do the surgery. And even though you have like the clearly demonstrated high need, we've just decided not to cover this anymore. Right. So I don't like it when those things intersect in a way that creates like a lack of access. So I do tend toward this more like social model of even if we could prove that there is something inherently trans about a trans person's brain, it probably is still better to err on the side of people shouldn't have to go through extensive testing. We should believe what people say. People should have access. And because of their freedom and control over their own body, their ownership over their own body, like we shouldn't stand in the way of those things. So,
Yeah.
which
And but
I think is kind of where most of us land, really.
and before I go, and like Josie, did you want to? I don't want to cut anyone off, so but I
I
did want to
want
respond to
I
that too.
go ahead and respond to that because and then I'll say something and then we got to move on to the next call, but go
Sure.
ahead.
Sure. How I wanted to respond basically was to say that I think there's also vulnerabilities on the other end of that too, right? Where we, um, if we frame it like as a choice, people can consider it not medically necessary. And I don't believe in this like hierarchical model where we say some people have like a medical condition, so they're more deserving of medical treatment than someone that has a more socialized, interpretation. Like, and I think at the end of the day, like how our whether you come to the conclusion through like a social perspective or from like an innate biological wiring perspective, both aspects are, I don't believe in like really the metaphysical too much. Like it's all happening in the brain. It's all happening from a biological perspective. And I don't think that like emphasizing that we are not defining womanhood or not defining biological female, but we are observing it and like measuring an individual's alignment with it. I don't think that might necessarily lead to the vulnerabilities that you guys are, reasonably concerned about. And I do think that they are very reasonable concerns. My perspective is just that like um, it's it's an I don't think it's a good idea to leave that completely out of the conversation, because it allows us to be mischaracterized in a way that doesn't fully reflect either one of our positions, like where we're coming from, regardless of like if that's the socialized perspective or the like medicalized quote unquote perspective.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think critically it's important to let's take it out of the trans discussion really quick. So right now
Mm-hmm.
there are discussions in the administration through RFK, who thinks that ADHD medication as well as SSRIs that help with depression don't prove that it's actually helping, and they try
Excellent
to
point.
medically measure this. They're trying to medically measure, they're trying to, like, okay, we can see this mechanism in the brain and the chemicals, and we can't prove by a matter of fact if it's actually helping somebody, but the fact that it's helping people, we still give those medications. And it's because they're trying to medicalize it even more, rather than giving the people the medication that they have. And all you have is the observations of the people's
Mm-hmm.
behavior and their feelings toward ideation and not ideation, or how they may have a mania and then they're more stable, and bipolar, and there's like so many things that
Mm-hmm.
people have with mental psychological conditions, but we
Completely agree.
don't require. Yeah, right. So for me, that's kind of the way that I think about trans people, in the way that we are looking at things, because there are people who think that because SSRIs are unable to be proven because of the psychological studies that they're trying to do, they're trying to get rid of them altogether. And so essentially that is my biggest fear, is if we try to pinpoint the exact transness in somebody's brain and we can't guarantee where it is, it gives room for the ability for the system and the political system to eliminate it full completely. And so for me, it goes back to the whole idea of like the sociological policy decisions that affect people's lives versus the way medical decisions inform those policy decisions. And I think that's why we're talking about the bodily autonomy piece. Just because somebody has taken an SSRI and they can't prove why it works doesn't mean that it isn't working. And so
I
so
would
I think that is essentially where this conversation eventually leads to, which is a very scary place.
I would love to respond to that, because I'm in complete 100% agreement with you on. And I love that you brought up that ADHD, and we can look at other things, right? There's people who say that PTSD isn't real, right? It's just
Mhm.
people choosing to stay victims. There's people that say that you know, schizophrenia, right, is just like uh, someone that's crazy, right? Like we don't need to. So I really appreciate that you bring that up, because I think that's kind of where my solution lies, is in being like, we don't need to go into someone's brain and prove exactly what neuronal structures. Like I'm going to try not to get too technical, because my area of college was specifically like neuronal wiring, like how computational systems are formed hierarchically, and there are hormone regulated patterns. So at the end, like it's to how these systems structure themselves in the form of like patterns of connectivity. I said I wasn't going to get too technical, but I kind of did. Sorry. But the reason I bring that up is to say that we can observe that hormones by themselves influence how neuronal structures are formed. So it's not a matter of, can we look into a person's brain and see, like, these are sexually dimorphic systems that are developed through hormone regulation, because hormones don't just randomly go around your body growing tits, right? They express your genome. They express the same
Yeah.
genes that, someone born with. The reason a woman with Turner syndrome can have a child, even though she only has one X chromosome, is because half of every chromosome comes from a male, half of every chromosome comes from a female. So all human beings with an X chromosome, which is 100% of human beings, have that element. So, to bring it back to my original point, like, we don't need to like look into someone's brain and say this is what makes them trans. We can observe patterns of cognition. We can observe and we can observe a person's like alignment, just like we can observe someone's cognitive patterns to diagnose them with PTSD or depression or anxiety, ADHD. That doesn't necessarily mean that, like, yes, we are vulnerable to people using the mindset that, like, Josie was pointing out, but I think we're all fucked in that scenario, right? Anyone with any cognitive condition. And my final point just being that, like, I think that the way to avoid that isn't to deny that there is a cognitive, and I don't think you guys are doing that, but I don't think it's to deny that there is a cognitive role that people play, into gender dysphoria or like being transgender, transsexual. I think it's to emphasize that, like, we can observe patterns in what a person is as opposed to what a body part is. The difference between objectifying someone and humanizing them. We can look at the aspects of what makes them human and observe the patterns and how they cognitively process information, and we can use that as a basis while still prioritizing bodily autonomy as the fundamental, hey, if this is your choice, here's informed consent, here's all the risks, here's all the benefits, you make the choice for yourself. But people can still have access to that information to have the informed consent element and decide, hey, this is, now that I have all the information about my cognition, about what is observed, now I can make that decision for myself.
Yeah, I think that we are overall in agreement. So thank you, Mila. I am going to let that stand as your last word. I think you summarized it very well, and I don't have anything further to add. So thank you so much for calling. Thank you for the stimulating conversation,
My pleasure.
and we hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, guys. Have a great one.
Bye.
Right. Bye.
Okay, so now that was a very good first call. Thank you, everybody, for sitting through with us with that high-level philosophical conversation. We kind of go back and forth. Sometimes we have like very, high-level trans people thinking about our philosophical existence, and then sometimes we have more accessible conversations, and we are probably going to pivot to something a little bit more accessible. But first, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, y'all. There's like 400 people here, and when you do that, it immediately tells YouTube to show this video to more people. So it's quick, it's easy, and it's free. It's a great way to support the show. If you are interested in supporting the show further and the other shows that we have on the line, don't forget that hitting the subscribe button gives you an option to get notifications. So we go live like 5 days a week and like twice on Sundays. So you definitely want to make sure your notifications are tailored to your preferences, while you're hitting the like button and everything. And don't forget also that your $5 or more super chats, we will read out loud at the end. And you can use that opportunity to vote with either hashtag Team Lux or hashtag Team Josie. The loser has to do a fun challenge. So, and let's just really quickly look at the schedule since we're here talking about the, other amazing shows on the line. So today is March 6th, which means the next 2 days, we're not doing any shows. I don't think we have a surprise Friday show this week, at least. There was that one last week I still need to catch up on. Very good conversation. But for Sunday, we are going to have the Sunday show with Matt, of course, at 2 p.m. And then the After Dark show with Forrest and Eve is going to be at 7 p.m. And then, of course, the rest of our shows, typically are going to be in that 6 p.m. slot. We've got Skeptalk on Monday with Shannon and Aaron Ra, Chewed Gum with Roxanne and Eve, and on Tuesday. Wednesday, we've got the Hang Up with Matt and John Gleason. And then, of course, TACIS next week at 2 p.m. Central is going to be me and Ben. If Ben is able to make it, that is the plan. So don't forget to make sure you have your notifications on, however you want to get notified, make sure it's happening. All right. So with that all said, I'm ready to move on to another caller. And I think the lines are still open.
Do you want to finish the poll?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's wait. Let's wait another caller.
Okay.
Do we want to do one more call and then do the poll?
It depends. So it looks like we have some spicy calls possibly. So do you want to do an easy call before we get to the poll and leave more time for the spicy one? How do you want to do this?
I figured we could take the next call in order and then we could do the poll.
Okay, great.
Does that sound good? All right,
okay,
cool.
Sounds
so
fine.
We have Aleph from Georgia, use he, him pronouns, wants to talk about transitioning before the age of 18, wants to ask about like why are so many of these policies attacking children directly. Aleph, you are live on the line. How's it going?
Hi, it's going great. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty okay
Great.
so far.
Hello?
So
Lay it
yeah,
on
what
us.
do you
What do
want
you
to
got?
chat us? Yeah,
I
go
do
ahead.
want to say I generally agree with you guys were saying up and when you're talking about adults. The problem that I generally have is when this goes down to like below 18. Because now you're talking
Hmm.
about children like in elementary or middle school or high school. It's a little bit grayer at the end of high school. Towards the middle of high school, we allow late teens to make a little bit more decisions in their life and other aspects. But we still restrict them. We even restrict them a lot in a lot of other area places, and that even includes up to having sex and who you have sex with, and even being able to do that. I know a lot of late teens do it, but it's still generally prohibited by parents broadly. So my question is like with so much with all of the uncertainty that comes about with all of this transitioning and all of the jargon for what is the difference between like me, for my position, gender and sex are the same thing. A woman means an adult female, a man means adult male. So, and I get that your position on that is different, but because there's so much uncertainty with it, I would say, why would we allow children to undergo these type of procedures? Or even, I don't even know
Sure.
if the two of you even
So
agree that we should.
I
so
kind of want
first,
to understand what you mean by uncertainty. Like, I want to just clarify
yeah,
that
I
before we
was
get too far
well.
into this.
I know, yeah, I was about to address that directly because if you look at uncertainty, the medical community, 99% of the medical community in the United States, from the American Psychiatric, Pediatric Associations, the American Medical Association, pretty much every doctor is a part of those organizations, all agree that transition-related healthcare is appropriate for all ages of care. So I also want to mean like if the entire medical associations of the United States are all okay with this, what is the uncertainty that you're talking about?
The uncertainty would be that I every time I tend to look this up, it's generally not as cut and dry as either side being absolute certainty or having that much, what you say, 95% certainty. I don't
Well,
generally
think
find it to
about
be
the
50-50,
American
but I generally find it to be
American.
60-40. And I'm just talking about America. Like I don't generally
Yeah.
look
Well,
for
so
studies
I want to
outside of
clarify,
America.
Aleph. I think what you're looking at is you're looking at like public opinion polls, whereas when we are discussing what is the most effective treatment for what we consider this a medical condition, like being trans is considered a type of medical condition that you receive medical treatment for. So when we want to know the answer about like what's the most effective medical treatment, I don't look at opinion polls. I go to the organizations that have a commitment to patient wellness, and I look at what they have decided is the best practice. And it's not just what they've decided is the best practice. That was not a great way to phrase that, but rather we've gone through various stages throughout the last 100 years of like how do we treat people who say that they have a gender that is not congruent with the gender that they were assigned at birth or the sex that they physically have. So, like, what do we do? Well, we've tried different things. We've tried to give them psychotherapy. We've tried to get them to do types of therapy that are like acceptance related, just accepting your body the way that it is. We've tried to give people antipsychotic medication. We've tried to give people antidepressant medication. And we have found through this trial and error that the best way medically to treat the distress associated with having like gender dysphoria is what we call it. Like the best way to resolve that stress is to give people medical transition. Or in the case of children, it's just a matter of like socially letting them get a new haircut, maybe letting them try different clothes, maybe trying out a hobby or something that is different from what they have done before. So, yeah, that's just like how we've come to determine like what's the best course of action here. And so when people are talking about, oh, there's so much uncertainty around trans issues, I'm wondering where that uncertainty comes from, because that uncertainty is not coming from any of the doctors involved or the patients involved. I mean, there's very occasionally people who regret some, procedure that they've gotten, but the number of people who seem to regret transition related procedures is much smaller than, for example, the number of people who regret having a nose job. So are we going to now try to make it illegal to get nose jobs? Are we going to say you need 2 therapists to sign off before you get a nose job? Why is trans stuff being treated differently? So that's where I wonder, like, what do you mean by uncertainty? Because medically, there is no uncertainty about the best approach to treatment.
I would say I wouldn't allow a child to get a nose job, just to throw on that point real quick. But what I would say is, like, children are very, very impressionable, and their imagination runs wild. The uncertainty comes in is where they're identifying to be a girl. Like, you say a boy is identifying that he is a girl. What does that actually mean to that boy? Because it can't just mean
Okay.
I identify being a girl because I want to wear dresses. I identify being a girl because I want to wear makeup or heels. Children
Okay,
play
I
dress
got it.
up and stuff all the time. That doesn't mean, uh-huh.
So yes, this is a conversation that goes on, is discussed a lot, and I just want to mention really quick, and is the fact that every major medical association agrees that the best treatment for gender dysphoria is transition related healthcare.
Including for
So
children, to
that
be
was
clear, medically
yes,
speaking.
including for children. So now let's start with your question, right? So what you're talking about is imaginations running wild and da 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 da. Yes, children's imaginations will run wild and they're great. And that's the beauty of being a child, right? The creativity of a child is probably one of the greatest things that we can experience if we're raising children or around children and all of that. It's a great joy to be around. But in reality, and when we think about this, right, because I said gender dysphoria, do you believe in the practice of pediatric psychology? I want to ask you that right off the bat. Do you believe in that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You mean like helping
So I
raising
just
like
want to make
children and
sure. So I wanted to say, like, first off, if you agreed with pediatric psychology as a premise of there are professionals out there that are incredibly skilled and talented and educated on being able to decipher what is happening with the child that is medical or a part of their imagination. So for example, if there is the unfortunate case where there's child abuse, right? If a pediatric psychologist can talk to that child in a way that allows them to decipher what is actually happening and what is in the kid's imagination. So we already know through practices of pediatric psychology, there are professionals out there that are able to cut through the noise of that thing that you are talking about. And that's what a trained professional is going to do. Myself, I am not a pediatric psychologist. I cannot cut through the noise and figure out if a child is giving me their imagination or if it's a lived reality. That is why there is a diagnosis called gender dysphoria. So what we know through the science of pediatric psychology is that it has to be insistent, consistent, and persistent gender dysphoria. And what we are able to see is that children who are able that do this to go through years of psychological care. So, for example, before a child even sees any type of medical treatment, such as puberty blockers or hormone care, they have to have over a year's worth of psychiatric care that allows a doctor to clinically, because it is a clinical thing, to clinically diagnose a child with gender dysphoria, which again is persistent, insistent, and consistent gender dysphoria. So when we're able to then diagnose that child with that, then they're able to go into the medical process and the medical system, which is doctor prescribed healthcare, by the way. It's doctor prescribed. This isn't something that is just willy-nilly given to children. This isn't just a parent able to just give their child care. This is having to go through the medical system. That is why that transition regret rate of like people detransitioning is less than 1%, which we know that regret rate with knee surgery is over 20%. So right off the bat, medically, they're doing a very good job of the stringent process of what this is. So what does this amount to? Well, this amounts to being about 400 kids a year being diagnosed with medical care that would require them to get puberty blockers or possibly hormone replacement therapy. And incredibly rare does a knife ever go around that child. Like, so bottom surgeries are usually out of the question. It's very rarely does it ever happen before the age of 18, because first off, your body's still growing, so a lot of surgeons want you to be fully grown to be able to start doing these surgeries. The most times that you will ever see surgeries happen is if it is a teenager that has already started their androgynous puberty, which is the puberty that they were born to have, and they're a trans boy and they have already developed breast tissue. And essentially what doctors have to evaluate with that is if the boy is binding their chest really tightly so they can fit in with their friends that are boys as well, they can do severe damage on their growing spines. So the doctor has to make an evaluation of this child of like, is this kid going to continue to bind and compress their spines, which can cause long-term lifetime compression damage to their spines for the rest of their lives that they have to deal with? Or is it easier to go ahead and do the chest surgery and chest reconstruction for that child to have that relief so they can continue to live their lives and grow and develop as full adults the way that they want to live? So, and even in that scenario, it's about maybe 5,000 people that have gotten those type of surgeries over the last 6 to 5 years. So we're already talking about a very small sliver of these population of children. And the reason I explain all of that is because what you said at the beginning, children's minds can run wild, their imaginations can run wild. Great. That's why we send people to pediatric psychologists that are able to see what is true and what is not. And that's why gender dysphoria diagnosis is required for all of these procedures to even be contemplated to begin with. Does that make sense?
You still with us,
You
LF?
still there? Your phone might have fell
Yes,
asleep. Wake
yes,
up your
yes.
phone. Okay, go ahead.
No.
You can.
So yes, I agree to like a lot of the stuff that you said. I do tend to just agree with, and it's very good information. I also agree with like parents being able to make the decisions of like for their children, like because what you're explaining to me is that it's a dual effort between parents and doctors or pediatricians and doctors who are making these
Absolutely.
ideals for these children. My only disagreement is, and you could say that this is just misinformational news, is when it's happening in schools without the parents' knowledge.
So
Is that
there
Do
is
like
you
no
mean
wrong
medical
information
procedures.
or?
Yeah, there's no there's no medical stuff happening in schools. Are you just saying you don't like the idea that like if a parent doesn't want to affirm their child, that the teachers should also not use the name that the child prefers?
Um, that's a good question. With the information, normally I would have said I would agree with the parent in this situation, but with the information that you've given me, that's going to be a little bit different. I normally give that type of power to the parent. Would you disagree with that? If so, like why? Why would you like not give that to the parent?
Well, we know that. So when we study the effects of whether we let people transition or not. So let's say we have a 12-year-old who was born a boy and they say that they identify as a girl, right? Let's just say we have an example and like that. And let's say we even have two of that kid and one of that kid has like an affirming parent and the other kid doesn't have any affirming person in their life. We can look at this and it bears out repeatedly that the kid who doesn't have even one supportive person in their life is significantly more likely to have extreme poor mental health, like being depressed, suicidal, having a difficult time completing their schoolwork, having a difficult time making and keeping friends, like kids who have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning because they are so in a bad way, mentally speaking. So even just one person makes a significant statistical difference in those social mental health outcomes for children. So if we have a parent who is not affirming, it's very difficult for the child to have that situation where all they want is a haircut and dad says no. So if we then have even just one teacher at school that the kid can talk to who will affirm them, who will say, you know, I understand this is what you're going through right now. And it doesn't, I don't need to say as a teacher that this is a permanent thing or it's a phase or anything. I'm just going to be here and listen to you. That is a significant improvement for the mental health outcomes. So if you just have even one class where you can use the name that you prefer, it is significantly better for the child. So like I run into this issue where there's this parents' rights discussion. But like I think children are people. And I know that that's like a radical thing that, people don't really understand, that like they exist separate from their parents and they deserve things that their parents might try to deny them. And we as a society have already agreed that that's the case, because if you don't take your child to public school and you're not appropriately homeschooling them, that's neglect and your child will get taken away from you. So we recognize that even when parents want to deny the child something, there is a mechanism where we say there's a certain line that you can't cross. You can't like beat your kids. You can't deny them food. You can't take the door off of the hinges. Like they have rights because they're American citizens. So to me, I don't see why the parent should have control over what name the kid goes by when they're at school. And I think that it would be very authoritarian and morally wrong to give parents the option to disrupt the kids' social acceptance and learning, if that makes any sense. Because it makes
Yeah, I
learning
mean, that
hard
makes
for
sense.
kids
I
if
mean,
you don't affirm them
So,
too.
Elf, and can I, Alf, can I also interject here? And once this happens, it's not like they're going to the school nurse and getting hormones, right? Like that's one thing I want to be clear as well. And I have a more of a question to you. Did you ever have a teacher when you were growing up that you kind of were like really good friends with, that you can find with, like maybe even a coach that you would like tell things to your teacher that maybe you wouldn't tell your parents? Did you ever have that in your life? Like a teacher that was really impactful in your life? Have you ever had that?
not necessarily. No. Unfortunately, I kind of was going from school to school when I was younger.
Okay. But
But
but but you
I
do know
did
it
meet
exists,
kind
right?
teachers throughout.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, for
Right. So
sure. Like if I
let's
had
say
stayed at a
something.
school long enough, I would have gotten it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And wouldn't you think that would be a betrayal of your trust if you did have that conversation with those teachers and those teachers immediately were calling your parents saying, "Oh, by the way, your kid was talking to me about all of these different things." Da, 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 da. That would kind of betray the trust of you and an educator. And it's really that level we're talking about, right? So like if it happens all the time with kids who aren't trans, where they're able to confide in their teacher saying, "Oh, I really like this boy," or things like that. Or maybe they're like, "Oh, I want to be, a singer, but my family doesn't want me to be a singer. They want me to be a computer engineer," for example. Like that kid would probably be pretty upset if that teacher's like, "Oh, by the way, your kid wants to be a singer, and I just wanted to let you know." And then all of a sudden the kid comes home and the parents like, "What is all this conversation about you wanting to be a singer that you're talking to your math teacher about?" That would be horrifying for that kid, right? Because it's like, whoa, I thought that teacher was cooler than that. I didn't know they were just going to go and just tell my parent everything. So that's why I'm sure you've heard the phrase, "It takes a village to grow to raise a child. Well, the education community is part of that village, and if you're a good educator, then you want to have the best interest of that kid in mind. And so that's where I kind of take a look when I think about these conversations about kids wanting to explore different things, because they may not know, right? They'll be like, hey, call me, I don't want to be called Samantha, call me Sam. Right? Can we do that for a little bit? Because I don't want to tell my parents, because my parents love the name Samantha and they would get so mad if I was going by Sam, but I really like Sam, right? And Sam is neither, male or female. It can be either. So again, it's like one of those little things that we don't think about, that kids ask. And that's really where the conversation is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I would say two things. I would say even though I disagree with like children being raised in a religious household, I'm atheist agnostic. I would say,
Mhm.
we still afford that right to parents. And it's like when I think about it, it's like if someone is Christian, like, I don't know if it'll be good if that child is, told that they could be a different religion, like Muslim, for example, and then they're confining into some Muslim teacher about something like this. And then now this child in their head is being converted to, Islam.
Yeah, but I don't.
That's kind of like uh-huh.
I the way I look at it in that case, and is this: it's like, as an educator and as a parent, and I think this is something that Lux was talking about as well, is we don't get to determine the outcomes of the child's self-discovery process. If a child wants to explore other religions, or if a child wants to explore different identities, if a child wants to, cut their hair short, or want to, or change their hair color to brunette instead of blonde, these are all milestones in a child's life that is about the self-discovery of that child. We do not get to determine the outcomes of the way the child does that self-discovery. And I think that as an educator, I think it's critically important for people to be able to explore what different points of view that exist outside of just the household itself. Because like you said, like, as someone who is an atheist, you're like, if you truly believe that it's kind of screwed up that kids are being raised, Christian in their home, then you understand that there's a narrow set of beliefs and boundaries that kid has to live in. So the idea that exploration of understanding, hey, Christianity is not the only religion out there, there's actually many religions, and there's also some people who don't believe in any of them, is just part of the education process of life. Now, I do not believe a teacher, regardless of their faith, should be having, closed door prayer meetings with their child, because I think just fundamentally religion and education and separation of church and state is very important to me. And I don't want state funds going into religious practices in school. I do believe that is something that shouldn't be explored in that way. But as far as letting a kid explore and know the idea that other religions exist is not a problem. So if somebody was like, hey, let me put it at this scenario. Let's say that a parent is like, hey, I don't appreciate that my kid is taught math by somebody who wears a hijab. That makes that kid ask questions when they come home, and they ask questions about, hey, why does my school teacher in math class wear hijab? Now we're reaching the levels of discrimination in a way that is like, oh wait, now you can't even wear a hijab because it may make their kid question of there's an idea of outside of Christianity, because that's much more likely to happen than the person with the hijab coming in and trying to minister and convert the child, right? And that's kind of where these lines are, right? Just the same, like, I wouldn't approve if a trans teacher went up to a kid randomly and says, hey, I think you're trans, are you trans? I don't approve that either, right? These are self-discovery situations that these now, if the kid identifies as trans and there's a trans teacher and that kid's like, hey, I think I'm trans, then I think that is a completely different conversation, because that is something that is not initiated by the teacher. That is something that the kid is bringing up as their own self-discovery mechanism. So does that make sense, that there's a delineation there, that I do believe there is a difference? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a difference as well, and I tend to agree with you in that regard. As long as like, I think have a child having someone to confide into is very important, as because there are situations where what if the child is being molested? Do you not want that child to be able to reach out to a teacher in that sense? And I think everyone would probably
Exactly.
agree that you probably would want a child to be able to have someone at school that they can reach out to.
Mhm.
But as long as the teacher's not cutting off their hair, they're just restricting it to like
Right.
pronouns that or name. That's different,
Yeah.
because it's not like I mind if my teacher called my son Peter Parker because my son wanted to be Spider-Man. So I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't cherry pick one versus the other. I
Yeah.
would prefer he not be
Exactly.
one to call Brittany, but at the same time, if it's more comfortable for his environment at school, I'm not gonna lie. I personally would like to know if that was going on at school, but I know all parents are probably not level-headed enough
Right.
to be able
Right.
to take that and strive and allow their child to thrive in school, and then do this one way at school, and another way. You get called Brandon at home, not Brittany, and be
Right.
okay with them being called Brittany at school, for example. I would say my other question for you was, so how young are we talking these, like what grade level, what age level are we talking about these transitions even starting? Maybe I could be getting misinformation on the age level. Are we talking like elementary or older?
Well, I mean, kids figure this out on different timelines, right? That's one of the important things to know about child psychology, is that you have to be aware that different children are developmentally in different places at different ages. And so maybe you have a kid who's 5 who feels very strongly like, I want to be a girl, and they ask questions like, "Mommy, when am I going to grow boobs?" And then they get really upset when mom says, "Well, you're not going to grow boobs because you're a boy." Like there is as early as 3 years old, like if you give kids like the opportunity to if you give them the language, which they already have the language, if you say the difference between boys and girls, kids can articulate how they feel at that young age. Now, we don't we will hear them and go, okay, so what I'm hearing is you want to play with different toys or something when they're that young. I realized I was trans when I was about 14 or 15. It was like basically in the deepest throes of puberty is when I kind of realized like, oh, this is not working for me. So, and then some people don't realize it until they're 65. So, basically just giving kids at a developmentally appropriate point. Like, so, using the language that is appropriate for them at that time, which we do with all kinds of things. Like, we also do this, like you said, with like wanting to make sure that children aren't being molested. We use the language that a 5-year-old understands, where we say, oh, these are your bathing suit parts. Like, this
Private
is your
parts.
swimsuit parts. Or private parts or whatever, like making sure like nobody's touching you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, but like using the language that a kid understands, right? Nobody should touch you any place that your bathing suit covers is kind of like the go-to. And then if they're older, then you can have a slightly more advanced conversation. So when we're talking about young kids who are in the elementary age, it does tend to be like, okay, I hear you. Let's try this in play at home. Like, let's try a princess dress while we're playing tea party at home. And then if that is persistent, if the kid is clearly much happier during that, then you might take them to the psychologist, right? So it's got to be a fluid situation where families are allowed to explore this with their child, where there's not like a huge stigma to maybe asking the school like, hey, do you mind using this other name or whatever, or they're 8 years old, there's no sex differentiation yet, can they play on the girls team? There's no difference at this stage or whatever. Like, just so long as we're taking it and letting the child lead, while also understanding that this has to fit within that medical paradigm or we can't move forward.
Yeah, and I just want to mention this as well. let's say in this case that I know a 5-year-old or a trans girl that knew when she was 5 and she's still under psychological care for a pediatric psychologist. When we're able to identify, let's say what Lux is saying, like 4 or 5 years old, what that means is that they go to a pediatric psychologist to start doing the diagnosis criteria of insistent, persistent, and consistent versions of that gender dysphoria. And after all that time that passes, all the way up until probably about 9, maybe even 10, sometimes even 11, that's when the conversation starts about maybe puberty blockers. So if you have a child who is 5 years old that has been clinically in the system, being observed by a psychologist that is able to diagnose that child with gender dysphoria, that's when the conversation at the age of 9, 10, 11 begins about puberty blockers. And the reason we give blockers is because it gives that child more time to think and contemplate before you actually do the permanent effects of cross-sex hormones, right? And so that is what the system is. So just remember that no medical treatments are happening to these kids until as early as 9. And also, I also want to mention this as well. If you have a kid who's like 7, and let's say they're not trans, right? And they start having their period at 7, or they start growing a beard at 7, you probably want to stop that. That's called precocious puberty because it's happening too soon. And then they're given puberty blockers until it's a healthy time to start their puberty. So that already exists for cis kids, and that's been being done since as early as the late 1970s. So it's like we've know the effects of these puberty blockers. So if a child, let's say at 10 or 11, 12, is like, okay, you have to make a decision which hormones you want, and that kid's like, actually, I want to just develop as my endogenous puberty, is essentially means that they can just go off the puberty blockers, and then they develop puberty wise the way that they were assigned at birth. So that's really what it is. So yeah, these procedures aren't happening to young kids. These are really critical decisions that are doctor prescribed healthcare involving the family of that child, and even the child has agency of being able to say, yes, I want this or not. Because we want to make sure that this is happening at a time where a kid can say yes and no. Does that make sense?
So now my question would that does make sense. So I guess my only problem would be is what happens to a transgender child who is experiencing transgender dysphoria and they do not have the support of their parent by the time they are like 9 to 11 or 11 to 14. Like what happens
right
to those
now,
children? Because then
yeah. So right now, those children in the United States are not able to access that medically required healthcare. And that's just how it is. There's just no way that the state can take a child and give them hormonal care, because again, it will have to be absolved through the state. Like, so now if there's evidence of child abuse for it, right, where like if the child is like, no, I don't want to cut my hair, and the kids are forcefully and the parents are taking, and there's like documented versions of child abuse because of their gender identity, then the state can get involved. But right now there's really no system or mechanism outside of a child doing the emancipation process for them to be able to go against the parents' wishes. And you are familiar with the emancipation process, correct? Where a child is able to say
not
no.
for children.
It's
Yeah, because
usually
it's a
teenagers.
certain age. Yeah, it's
Yeah, you
usually
have to like
teenagers that have
prove
to
that
go through that.
you have to prove that you can
Yeah,
support yourself. You have to have a job. I looked into it
it's a very
extensively when I
high
was a
standard.
teenager. Yeah, so which
It's
is
a
to say
very
that
high standard.
Oh, so but that's like by the time you're
children
like 14 to
right.
16, right?
Yeah,
So
Like
yeah,
somewhere in there.
children who don't
exactly.
have their parents' support just don't get this medical care. Like that they
Yeah, it just can't
simply have
happen.
no recourse, no matter how harmful it is for them, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Which is part of the
that's where
whole
we
like
are.
kids belong to their parents thing that I have a problem
Yeah.
with,
But
obviously.
that's that but right now with the law right now, that's how it is. The parents have to approve of the doctor prescribed healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, I was put out as a when I became atheist agnostic, I was made homeless at
Mm.
16 as a result of that.
There you go.
So I can just
And
imagine,
that's
what it would be in the
yeah,
reverse
and
Yeah.
of
that's
having to, get a job and
yep. And then being trans on top of that, and that happens all too much in our society right now, where kids are getting kicked out on the street because they're gay or trans. It's a
Actually, I
huge
think the
reason why
majority
there's
of
a
homeless
giant
youth are LGBTQ.
yeah, exactly, because parents just kick them out on the street.
Mhm.
And it's really tragic and it's sad and it's awful. And that's where we are in our society. That's why all this misinformation that's out there is so dangerous. Right, because it actually hurts children at the end of the day for people who don't wanna accept their children for who they say they are. Because if a child's getting kicked
I
out of
mean,
their
because
home,
if
I
I
can
had
tell
a
you it's not
child
their
that was
imagination.
right, it's like if I had
Go
a
ahead.
child that was experiencing that, it's as much as I would disagree with their decision, there's no way I would abandon them. Um, In
Yeah,
fact, I would
exactly,
do
and
what
that
we just
makes you a
talked
good
about. I would
parent.
go to a pediatrician
Yeah,
and I would talk to doctors and I would do all those things. And
exactly,
even
and
if,
you
because I do have my own biasness, I would probably end up disagreeing with the doctor. I couldn't look at my child who is suffering and say, because I disagree with this lifestyle and I disagree with the doctors, if this does help my child, like, is there good evidence that it does help, it
exactly.
would help my child to do all these things. I don't understand, like, but a lot of people are irrational. As atheists,
Yeah,
I've seen the atheist
well
experience episode, and we see how people are irrational in that area, and
and
Mhm.
I'm
and they disagree
and
with
so I
religion.
absolutely, and we're gonna have to wrap this call up, here in a second, but I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you with this. And heaven forbid, like a child has like a chronic medical condition that actually hurt, like let's say it was cancer or whatever, you wouldn't listen to general population opinion on what to do. You would listen to the doctors. You'd listen to the experts in the field. You would listen to the people who are clinically trained to deal with that. So if it was cancer or if it was like an appendicitis or something like that, it should be the same thing for gender dysphoria. If your child is exhibiting gender dysphoria, you would hope that the parents lean on the doctor's advice and not some politician out there, right? And that's where my biggest contention is like we should always follow the advice of medical doctors that are providing doctor prescribed healthcare and their clinical experience when dealing with your child, than rather some freaking government fat cat sitting somewhere saying, no, I want to tell you what you can and cannot do with your children. And that's where my self is just like, it's about right to privacy, it's a right to bodily autonomy, and we should be able to give the health care that your doctor and your family approves, that says it's okay. And putting the government in that in any such way is just wrong and antithetical to our freedom as Americans.
I agree. I
Yeah,
definitely agree.
yeah,
Even though I disagree with the lifestyle, like I say, if I had that type of, like, because like when it comes down to adults, I believe adults have you can believe in what you want, and like I heard you guys say earlier, that you don't choose to be gay or you don't choose to be
yeah,
these things. I agree. I couldn't like a guy if I tried.
yeah,
I couldn't find him
exactly. It's the
attractive
same thing.
in any sexual way if I tried to. So there's no way
Yeah,
you're going to convince me that a guy is saying he's attracted to a guy. He's just choosing to do that, because I don't, I can't even,
yeah.
when you really get into the philosophy, I can't even really tell you why I'm attracted to women. So
So
Yeah.
so
I
yeah,
just
so
am,
we're gonna
you know.
wrap this call up, and I would love for you to call in again, and so we can discuss that part, because I think that's another great conversation and talking about like the understanding of trans people and getting back, because I'd love to dig into your initial statement in the beginning of this call, such as you think gender and sex are the same thing, and I would love to jump in with you on that. So please call again so we can start investigating that part, because as an atheist, we have to be skeptical of our beliefs. We have to question our beliefs. So I hope that you would join that journey with us in the next call. That you call us again, please. This was a great call. Thank you so much.
I absolutely, no problem. I absolutely will. I really appreciate you, Lux and Josie.
Yep,
Yes.
you got it. All right, thanks, Aleph. We'll talk
Awesome,
to you
Awesome.
next time.
awesome,
Thank
awesome.
you.
I really appreciate it. All right,
All
Bye
right. Bye
thank you.
bye.
bye. Woo! Okay. So, I actually, I know that I'm putting it off again, but I want to take another caller before we run
Same.
into the poll. Yeah, so we're gonna hop to David, who did not provide pronouns, lives in the United States, wants to talk about human rights, specifically men's rights. And so let's get this going. David, you should be live on the line. I don't know why the talk button is not working.
Hi.
There it is. David, hello. How
Hello?
you doing?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Doing
Doing all
good.
right. Lay it on us. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so I just want to start by saying I'm an atheist and I support human rights. I support women's rights and gays' rights and trans rights and minority rights. And I'm just kind of wondering why nobody supports my rights, like men's rights.
How so?
Sure.
How
Well,
how do we
I've never
not? How
really
do we
talked.
not? Go ahead.
It's never like talked about. I feel like it's like I appreciate all the atheist stuff because I'm a minority in that group. And I hear a lot of trans stuff, which I think is really critical. I think all these groups need to be supported, but men really are suffering right now, and I don't feel anyone's talking about it.
I find that really
I mean,
interesting because
what
I
you?
see a lot of discussion
Yeah.
about men's issues. Like I see, first of all, the main thing that I
On this
see is I see a
line,
lot of discussion about the male loneliness epidemic,
Yeah.
particularly among
Mhm.
feminists.
that's
Since
right.
feminism is
But
We can
that
talk
doesn't
orientated
about
right.
it.
around gender equity in general, I see I see lots of feminists talking about that
Yeah.
issue. And
In fact,
I
on
myself,
Chewed Gum,
Well, that's good. That's good.
I talked
yeah,
I
about
don't
it on
really
Chewed Gum.
hear it, and I don't hear it on the show either.
well, this show is
I
specifically about trans issues, so we don't really talk about the issues exclusively to cis men or
I
cis
thought
women,
I thought it
really.
was about I thought it was about human rights. Like I thought you included atheists and women's rights and gay rights and minority rights.
Well, sure.
I mean,
This
we
specific
could.
show is the Transatlantic Call-In show,
Well, then
where we tend to talk
wouldn't
about
men's
that because, David, hold on,
right?
because that's what
But then
people
wouldn't
ask
men's
about when they
rights
call
be
in.
included within human rights? Wouldn't men's rights be included within human rights within that? Like,
It is.
why talk about all those other things and then not talk about this one group?
Well, because that's
So,
what our
David, hold
callers
on.
ask about. It's not like we don't lead the
Yeah.
conversation is one thing that I think is good to point out. Like when we invite
Oh,
people to call in to talk to trans people about trans issues, they tend to call about trans people and trans issues. So if you would like to talk
right.
about men's rights, I would love to
I
hold a
would.
discussion for
Absolutely.
the way in which you
I
guys
would
are
too.
impacted
Oh, thank you.
negatively. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because on the show
I
Chewed
appreciate
Gum,
that.
we've actually had a call or a call in about men's rights and the male loneliness epidemic, and we had a very long, great conversation. And that channel is mainly a feminist channel, but we had a really great conversation about men's rights. So yeah, let's talk about it. What
That's
do you
great.
like to talk about men's rights?
Oh, perfect. I really appreciate that. I was not aware, I guess, and I think it goes well beyond just loneliness. I think there are a lot of like fundamental rights that are being violated, and that's kind of part of the cause of maybe some of the loneliness. But like for me personally, like I really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about this stuff. So like for me personally, I've been threatened. My girlfriend grabbed a shotgun, said my shotgun said she was going to shoot herself if I left her. And she also told me that she was going to call the police and make fake false police reports and that I hit her and things, which I hadn't done. And she was going to get me kicked out of my apartment because she wouldn't like be quiet when I had to call the police on her to get her to leave. I've had women scratch my eyes. I've had my ex burn my face with acid and infect my eyes when I was sleeping, and I told the police, and nothing was done. I think circumcision is male genital mutilation, and it removes sexual satisfaction from men because you can't get a full stroke. I think men need reproductive rights. I feel like my life is probably most impacted by not having reproductive rights. Now, what I mean by that is not denying the right to women to have abortions. Women should have the right to have abortions. But if they get a right to choose after pregnancy, I feel men should have an equivalent right, which would be if the woman knows the man doesn't want a child, especially beforehand, and then she keeps it, why is he still financially obligated
Okay, hold
to
on.
provide
Okay,
for it?
David, thank
All right,
you.
there's a
You've
lot of
laid out like
things. You're
3
rapid
different issues
firing.
there, and I would love to get
Yeah.
into it. Number 1, don't come inside a woman if you don't want her to get pregnant. That's
Well,
number 1. So
well,
it's
hold
there's
on.
because
Can
consent
I
goes
say
both ways
something really
there.
important about that?
Oh,
Nothing
I
is
guess so.
100% except for abstinence and abortion. Let me repeat that. I am a biologist. Nothing is 100% aside from abstinence and abortion. You don't have to come in a woman for her to get pregnant. There's semen in pre-cum.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So
sure. Yeah,
first, I don't want to. I don't want to get into the science of these type of things.
None
I
of
don't.
that is
I don't.
100%. This becomes a human
Okay.
rights
Sure.
issue.
So,
Because
so
nothing is
here's what I have
100%,
to say
it
then,
becomes
David.
a
David,
human
give me a
rights
second.
issue.
I want to jump in here. You're correct. There is no 100% guarantee here.
Thank
So
you.
then what I would say is if there's a man who
So it
doesn't
becomes a
want to have
human
a
rights
pregnancy,
issue.
David, I would love to
Let us
respond
finish our
to what you're
statements.
saying. If a man doesn't want a baby, then he should not have sex. So I think that you are making a
So
choice,
everybody
just
gets
like a
to have
woman is
sex
taking on.
except for men.
Hold on,
What about
David,
David.
I
You
women?
gotta
do
let
not
us finish.
appreciate being
Do you say
repeatedly
that to women?
interrupted. It's not cool.
Do you say
We will
that to
mute
women?
you. I'm trying.
Do
So
you say that to women?
I'm making a
Is it
response.
discrimination?
I'm making a
All right.
response.
Now I'm
What?
muting you. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm muting you so Lux can finish the conversation.
So I'm making an oppositional narrative to the narrative that gets used frequently. The common narrative is women keep your legs shut. Women don't have sex if you don't want to have babies. So when a man comes in and says, I should have the right to not pay child support, then my response to that is, okay, well, then either don't come inside a woman who you don't want her to get pregnant, or if you are taking the position that there is no 100% guarantee, then don't have sex with a woman who can get pregnant. Like, that's my answer to that question, because it's not, I don't really see this as like a matter of like your right to not have to pay child support when like like you also did the thing that is resulting in like a pregnancy. So like I'm
Okay.
just making the statement in response to like a cultural
All right.
dynamic.
We're gonna
But I also don't want to
unmute
get
you
stuck
now.
on that particular issue. I'd rather talk about a different
Yeah.
aspect of this.
Okay,
And I want to
David,
give
you're
Josie a
unmuted.
chance to jump in
Sorry.
too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I don't say those things. I don't tell women to keep their legs closed. I support the right to have abortion.
Okay.
So why are you using
Cool.
that argument against me personally?
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I
say
mean,
those
you know,
things.
because I think that you're
So if they have
abdicating
a
a
right,
portion of your responsibility if you have sex with someone and
well,
then it
so
results in
aren't
a
they?
pregnancy and you decide that it's not your problem. I think that
So
that
do you
is
say
in
the
itself
same?
a type
Can
of
I
problem.
talk? Can I talk for a second? So do you say the same thing to women? Do you tell them to keep their legs closed? Do you tell women to not have sex if they don't want to have kids, or do you tell them they can have an abortion?
Well, yeah, well, women aren't saying like, well, I mean, like,
So
I
you
guess like
need to
a
say the
woman has
same
the right
thing,
to
or you're
put their kid
being
in foster care.
sexist.
There are women who walk out on their kids and leave them with the dad, and there's a single dad. You know, I'm not
There's safe
saying that's a
haven
good
laws as
thing.
well. They
This
can
is
leave
a
them at a
very
fire station or a hospital and
so
walk away without criminal abandonment charges. Women can abandon and kill their kids, but men can't walk away. Like a woman killed my
kill
child,
their kids.
but I'm
I've
supposed to
seen
support
many
ones that I don't want.
prosecutions.
So you said you're
They're
pro-abortion, but you call it killing kids.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
can't
okay.
kill the kids.
I
So
believe
that's
everyone
called
should have sexual
lying.
freedom. Everyone should have a choice.
If you
Everyone
say,
should
hold
have a
on,
choice.
David,
Everyone
if you
has
say that you're pro-abortion, but then you call it killing kids, that means you're a liar. You've lied to me, and that is not a
no.
good foundation
No,
for a
listen. I
conversation.
eat meat. Meat is murder. I still eat meat. I'm killing a life. I'm taking a life. I feel terrible about it. I still do it because I value my life more than that life, I guess, or else I'd kill myself, which I've tried to do, but I can't apparently.
That's interesting.
All right.
I
right.
just
At least I
have
can
to
respect your
live with
ideological
killing
consistency
things.
on that topic.
So David, all right.
But
Can I get a word
go ahead,
in?
Josie.
I want
I want to let
to get
Josie
a
in
word
here.
in.
This is really
Yeah.
important. The idea that just
David.
because it's a human life doesn't mean that we shouldn't kill it.
Okay,
Or that
David.
we
So
can't.
first off,
I grew up on a farm. We drowned puppies and kittens when we had too many of them.
David.
You know
all
how
right.
cute
Can
cows
I
are
get a
when
word
they
in?
play? They're like dogs.
Okay. So first off, I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan for 9 years, so I'm very ideologically consistent with my
Do you eat
morals.
plants?
Anyway, so
You know plants are organisms too.
David.
They're life
Oh,
forms.
David.
David, I muted you because you're not being a fair communicator. This is a show where we have a conversation back and forth. If I say 3 words and you're saying what if and trying to jump around, this conversation doesn't become good to watch. It is our job as host to be able to have conversations with people who want to have a conversation. But I know that right now there's a lot of energy in the air right now, and I want to bring it down a little bit because I do think that there is a lot of ability to have a good conversation here. And so just because I say I'm vegan doesn't mean I'm ready to have a conversation about veganism and plants. That's not what this conversation is. And if you want to change the conversation from men's rights to veganism, I'm down to have that conversation with you. But I want to have a consistent conversation about a topic, and your topic is men's rights. So I'm going to unmute you so we can kind of get back into the conversation. Okay? You're unmuted.
I understand, and I want to have a productive conversation as well. But you need to allow me to respond if you say something that needs to be responded to.
Okay, so
That doesn't
we
mean you're
have
allowed to
determine-
interrupt.
You can't interrupt. That's where things are getting a little annoying, is like you're just like interrupting a lot. So I want to get back to the core of this conversation. And first I want to say, David, I'm sorry that all those things happened to you as a person, right? It's a horrific thing to be abused. It doesn't matter what gender you are. I am so sorry that people have been emotionally abusive. I'm sorry that people have been physically abusive, and I'm sorry that this has happened at the hands of women, as well as violence can happen from any type of hand, men, women, or any type of people. So first, I just want to acknowledge all of that, because that's a lot of hurt there, and I just want to acknowledge that sucks.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I care about you as a person, David. That's why I want to have this conversation, because there's a lot of pain, right? And as someone who has experienced pain in many ways, I want to make sure that we are all talking to each other as humans, as people that have
Yeah,
real
I don't want
issues.
I don't want to be adversaries. And what breaks my heart is I've
I don't
supported
either.
you guys for so long, and then I feel like
Yeah.
I'm not being represented. Is all.
And that's
I'm
why
on
we're
you
having
guys'
this conversation.
side, and then I feel like you guys are casting me out.
Okay, so first I want to just say, I'm sorry that you are having these feelings that we're casting you out. I just want to say that Lux and I brought you in with the good faith understanding, because you said, hey, this is an important issue to me and I want to bring those things up. And Lux and I are saying, great, let's bring it up so you can feel heard. That's why we want you to, like, we're on your side too, David. We're on your side too.
Thank you.
And we want to make sure to be able to have a conversation with you where it's not a conversation of butting heads, but actually talking about serious issues right now, because these are some serious issues that you brought up.
Is that you guys are, I guess that's what I needed to hear, is that you guys are on my side, because I just feel attacked a lot. I guess that's why I'm a little defensive. I guess I'm used to people being like just attacking me all the time. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's bring the defenses down so we can be vulnerable and have these conversations, so people can hear these conversations, because there's people that are watching right now that probably need to hear some of this stuff, right? Because if you're feeling this way, I'm sure there are people that are watching that also feel this way. Right, exactly. So if you want to be somebody that represents this idea, let's have a good conversation about it, okay?
Okay.
All right?
I'm sorry.
All right. So it's okay. No, it's fine. It's completely fine. I understand. These are tough conversations. So you're very brave for coming on the show and having this conversation with us, because I know it can be hard. It's nerve-wracking, especially. Go ahead.
I'm also I have like borderline. I don't know if you know what that means, but so like I have very extreme emotions. It's very difficult for me to regulate myself.
I get it.
Oh,
Me too. When I get deregulated, I get there too. Yes, believe me, emotional regulation is hard sometimes, and especially when you're on a massive platform and there's a lot of people.
I do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into some of these questions, right? Let's pick one men's rights topic, just one. Because we don't, and if this conversation goes well, you'll call back another time and we'll have another one of these conversations. So out of all of the things outside of the personal stuff that happened to you, which we acknowledge sucks and we're sorry that happened, pick the men's rights issue that you want to have a conversation about right now. Just one, because there's a lot.
The one that affects me the most, because it makes it so that I can never have sex while I watch everyone else have fun, is reproductive rights.
Okay, great.
It makes me want to kill myself. You understand? Like,
okay. Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and I always say this too. If you don't have a therapist, you should get one. I have one. And it's one of those things that is incredibly important, right? Yeah, because
It, it
I'm
has
not a
a,
clinical therapist, right? I'm not a
no, I know.
therapist or a psychologist,
Yeah, I know.
and so for me, I want to make sure that you know that when you're in crisis like that, I want you to seek help,
I'm not in
right?
crisis right now. No, you don't
Okay,
have to
all
worry about
right,
me
all
doing
right,
anything right now. Be clear.
okay, all right. I just want to
I'm
be
just telling you
clear
how.
that you know.
Yeah, it's not
Yes,
an
I understand.
emergency.
You're
I'm
expressing how you
right
feel.
now.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
So I'm just telling you how
Okay.
much it impacts my life. It literally makes me want to kill myself to not be able to have sex while watching everyone else go out and have sex all the time and have fun because they have rights or don't have to worry about it because they're gay.
Can I
Okay.
make a suggestion? So I have BPD, and I just wanna throw that out there. I went through the highly intensive dialectical behavioral therapy program for 2 years. I actively use my skills, and I have been actively engaged in peer support for, like, the past 4 years, really. So I think it's good to try to, first of all, recognize when your thought is disproportionate. Like, just because you're worried about maybe getting someone pregnant doesn't mean that you can never have sex. You can have sex with someone who's on the same
I,
page as you about wanting
it
to get an
would destroy
abortion.
my life.
Also,
It would
yeah.
destroy
Hold
my
on,
life.
David.
So David, give me a second. Talk
Hold on.
to, like, whoever you date, get on the same page about use of birth control, about using more than one birth control method. Here's another
Do
hot
you
tip.
understand how
Date
shouldn't
Hold
I
on,
have a right
David. You're
also?
interrupting me about to
David.
say something
Why
so
do I
funny.
David.
I'm about to say something
Shut
funny.
up.
Let me be
David,
funny.
hold on.
Date trans girls. If you are worried about getting a girl pregnant, date a
Let
trans
me
girl.
let me t- let me say something about that because I have thought about that because I am not close-minded and I am trying to be open, but I am just not
Sure.
gay. And I'm sorry, but I've
But
tried
it's,
and they don't feel
do you
like
not want to have,
women to me.
okay, will you have anal with a cis girl? Can you at least find a cis girl who really likes anal? Because they exist.
Well, you can still get pregnant that way too. It can drip out and into like the thing is,
Well, I'm
it's
talking about
taking over
trans
every.
girls.
Oh, with trans.
Yeah,
What I'm
but
saying is that
yeah, you
what
see
I'm
what I
saying is
mean?
that
Okay.
well, can I say something?
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
when I look at a trans person, a lot of times like they're presenting so strongly feminine and so convincingly that I feel myself attracted to them. But then when I start to get physical or something, it becomes obvious that the bone structure and other things that like they
Oh
just
my gosh,
feel
David.
like men. Do you want me to be
Well,
honest or not?
I mean, you
I
are being
support
honest, but
everything
I'm
with
just
trans. I
saying,
just don't
David.
know what you want. What do you want me
So
to
I was
say?
So
joking.
basically,
I just want to be
the
clear that I was joking in the
conversation.
first place.
Yeah, first off, David, like no one is, it's a joke, and it wasn't like you. But there's people of all body types, right? It's like, you know, I'm pretty petite myself. You know, I'd like to know that it's for me, it's like I've had many relationships with men who have told me there's been no difference. It's just finding the right person that fits you. But let's go back to the
There
initial
might.
conversation,
Let me
right?
let me give you credit. Let me give you credit for that. So, like, yeah, maybe like in the what is it like in the Thailand or something? They're all very small and petite or something. But then, like, say they take their pants off and there's still like a dick and balls, and like
Well,
I don't know. Like,
but
I'm not.
that's
Everybody's free to do what they
David.
want, but I just like
Let's
inside of
bring
me, I'm
down
not
the
attracted
energy.
to that.
Let's bring the energy down, okay? All right. I get what you're
I'm
saying,
not
and
attracted to a dick and balls.
It's called a joke.
that's fine,
And
and
also,
nobody.
that was rude as fuck. I'm dropping you for
Yeah.
being a disingenuous troll. Thanks, everybody, for letting us entertain. We're pretty confident that this is a guy who called one of our call screeners a bitch previously. So we let him on because it was going to be a fun conversation. It was a fun conversation. He was really rude. And like, I think the crying was fake, if I'm being completely honest. I appreciate Josie having this approach of like being compassionate and taking people for their word, but everybody could see how I felt on my face. You know, I kept my words to myself, but the face had some things to say. So I don't know if we're ever going to take a call from that number again. I'm not going to outright say let's ban, but like maybe let's ban. If it's the same guy that we think it is, then maybe it might be a good idea to ban
Yeah.
him. Anyway, so
Yeah.
with that
I
call
would have.
done, yeah, go ahead. I'll
Yes,
give you your last.
and if you are, if and David, I because I always err on the side of caution on these type of things, and maybe it is my kind, compassionate soul that I have. But David, if you are having crisis, or anybody on this call that is in crisis and having multiple thoughts of self harm, call 988. I as a person I I'm on the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. I am on the Advisory Lived Experience Board, and we do give a lot of training to the 988 folks. They're there for you. They're able to talk to you, especially when you're in a place where you can't regulate and you can't have these conversations. They do save lives, especially right now where political climates are incredibly difficult. It's incredibly important that we use these resources when you need them. And I will say, as a person that had dealt with ideation myself for my PTSD as a veteran and a trans woman, I have used services like these before, and they are life-saving. So this is coming from personal lived experience that I say that.
Yes. So if you're actually in crisis, we tend on that side of like, yeah, believe people when they tell you what they're going through, and make sure you get in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with to make it through that crisis moment. If you have peer support through therapy, rely on that peer support, because that's what it's for. Shout out to DBT for being life-changing evidence-based therapy practice. So let's take a little breather and talk about the poll from this week.
Yes.
We already talked about last week's poll. Now we're ready for this week's poll. There's been the one in the chat for you guys to vote on. And like, surprisingly, 8% of the people who voted in the chat said that yes, a trans person is committing fraud when they change their gender marker or when they use that gender marker. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that discussion bears out in the comments on the community post tab. The reason why we're talking about this is because a lawmaker in Texas, whose name I should know, he proposed to basically say, yes, it is a form of fraud, felony fraud, to use a different gender marker. His name is Tom Oliverson, legislator in Texas. So this law is unlikely to pass. Like, it's not likely that it's going to pass. However, we have seen this kind of thing in Texas before, where they tried to pass a law that made getting your children gender-affirming care illegal. They couldn't pass the law, so they just changed the definition of child abuse using their executive power to circumvent the democratic process and thereby steal more power for the Republicans. So this is of concern. And I want to be clear, some people sometimes accuse us of asking questions in a leading way or asking questions that have an obvious right and wrong answer. And this might be one that feels like, oh, there's a clear right and wrong answer. And yet, several trans people I know in the state of Texas are now going to have to contend with, even if this law doesn't pass, they may still choose to try to pass or change some executive rule so that they're going to just tweak the definition of fraud and include this. And people are concerned about being arrested or needing to move and like trying to make that decision of should I stay and fight or should I leave? And it seems like the answer is increasingly that they're going to criminalize things that it was legal. It was legal for you to change your gender marker. And so now to say not only is it no longer legal to change them in the future, and not only will we change it back if you ever need a new driver's license, but that if you continue to use that driver's license and the thing that it says on there currently, that's illegal. It's a felony. So be concerned. This is a normal thing to be concerned about, right? Call the people who are doing this, Tom Oliverson, in this particular instance, and also finding out have there been any other legislators who've said they're going to support this bill? We need to start primarying people. We need to start being more aggressive. Do you have anything you want to add, Josie?
Yes, I have a lot to add. Maybe not so much.
Yeah,
So basically, this is how this particular bill is going. Right now, the person that is submitting this bill is brand new to the House. He's a Democratic pariah, obviously, and he's also a Republican pariah. The Republican Party doesn't even like him in the state of Texas. So this bill is going to fall so flat on its face, it's not even funny. Now, the thing that we need to do as a community, and this is one of my suggestions, is to not let this get into your head where it causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of uproar. Because if we just let it just be silently, just let it die because it's never going to pass in any way, it doesn't alert other shithead Republicans to basically say, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that, because it triggers the libs, and because that's a lot of the ways that they try to do this work. Now, we still have a long time, 4 years more of this bullshit that's going to be happening throughout the country. And we can't panic at every sign of everything that's going on. Now, is this a very real reality? Are people in power trying to pass this type of stuff? Absolutely. But just know that this is a trap. This is something that they are trying to make us be angry about, so you can lift the profile up of this person that's running, that's doing this bill. I won't name him because he doesn't deserve it. It's almost like you don't name the name of a shooter, you don't name the name of assholes that freaking try to pass this stupid shit. And so don't give this person notoriety. Don't give them the benefit of your anxiety. This is shit. It's dumb. It's not going to pass. It's really, really stupid. And we need to always fall in and understand that there are incredibly intelligent policymakers that are trans, that are legal makers, that are also lawmakers. There are trans lawyers and attorneys. There are trans judges. There are trans people all over throughout power that will tell you when it's time to panic. And this one ain't it. So let it fall on its flat, and let's laugh along the way that we should be laughing at them for being so obtuse, so stupid that their party doesn't even think it's a good idea. So let's do that. That's my advice to this situation. Laugh at them. Don't give them the benefit of your anxiety. Because that's why they're doing it.
I always take the, be reasonable approach, is like, be aware that this is what's happening. Be aware that it could negatively impact you. I mean, don't panic. What I want you to do is very calmly make your go bag. Like, what I want you to do is be very calmly relocate your entire life to somewhere else. But I like saying the names because I feel like you have an address and a name, and people should protest, and people should primary you, and all that kind of shit. So, I don't want him to get
They
famous,
want a circus.
but it's
They
like,
want the circus.
well, yeah, but I also, it's a little bit like Sarah McBride, and part of the reason why I disagree with her so strongly is because she's like, this is all a distraction, and it's like, it's not a distraction. This is the mechanism by which they are stealing power.
I will acknowledge and say you are right. There is a difference, though, between Sarah McBride's distraction, because the distraction is the fact that the rule actually exists and she can't use the public bathroom in Congress. That to me, that when you call that a distraction, now you're off base. It's not a distraction. When they're actually trying to pass trans sports bans in the House and having full votes and barely and can't even get cloture, but get close to it, that is more than a distraction. For me, this is just some fucking dumbass legislator that just got into office trying to make a name for himself in a fucking hateful ass party. And that to me is where there is a line where I think we don't have to give them the satisfaction. And I think when it actually is like going to the floor for a vote with sponsors and like has all of these different things that are around it.
Yeah.
That's
not, it would be worthy of more alarm in that situation. I just want to be clear that just because this law is not going to pass doesn't mean that they're not going to find a different way to do it. Basically, it feels like it would be really hard for them to pass this, but I wouldn't put it past some other state to, and it's like, how much are we breathing life into it? Regardless, we are interested in getting your commentary, though. So please share your answers in the community tab page. We appreciate it. I'm sure this is going to be a very lively discussion. If Josie and I are here having a very lively, moderate disagreement, then I'm sure that you all will have some interesting things to say.
It's very moderate, very small. It's a very small,
tiny disagreement that we're having.
Disagreement at all.
Yeah, totally fine. So, so this is a real thing that someone tried to pass.
This way, that's
right. And me holding my chef's knife with my new grip where I grip the handle. Yeah. Like, well, this is technically... Anyway, so with all that being said, so now we're getting close to the end of the show. We have 2 more calls waiting. So as we get to the end of the show, there should be a new poll that has showed up in the chat. And what we do here is $5 or more super chats get read out loud at the end. And also, you can use that super chat to vote #TeamLux, #TeamJosie, and whoever loses has to defend a silly position. And so we have the poll up now for you to vote on what position you're wanting us to defend. Today, you can choose between we should have a church bake sale instead of the IRS. Instead of doing taxes, let's just do a church bake sale. You can vote for grown-ups need recess too, or that we should have your favorite dinosaur instead of your gender marker on your driver's license. No gender marker, only favorite dinosaur. So get your votes in, both on the poll and with your super chats. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. And with all that said, oh yeah, hit the like button too, if you haven't done it already.
and subscribe.
Yeah, and
If
subscribe.
you haven't subscribed,
all right.
then that's punishable. Yeah.
What are you doing if you haven't subscribed?
Yeah.
Come on. All right. So with that said, we have 2 more callers left, and I'm just going to go ahead and take them in order if that works for you.
That works.
All right. So we have Robin. She, her pronouns from Missouri, says that they would like to ask, or she would like to ask us about healing from religious trauma as a trans person specifically. So, hey, Robin, you are live on the line. What's up?
Thank you, Lux. Thank you, Josie. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for having me on your program. So,
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
I don't know. Oh, thank you. So I don't know if either of you are from a particular religious background or not. Are
I
either
was
of you?
raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic, then later Pentecostal, and then I became an atheist.
I was a little bit more
Okay.
loosey-goosey. Like I was being taken to church, but there wasn't anything being heavily impressed upon me. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. So I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting as a person, and I, like a lot of people in the LGBT community, especially the trans community, if they grow up in a religious background, there's a lot of trauma that is associated with that, especially with if you're from a fundamental evangelical background or a really conservative Catholic background. And I have found that as difficult as it is for me to say this, I'm being kind of vulnerable in doing so. I have a prejudice towards Christians, and I don't want to have a prejudice towards Christians. I think, largely perhaps stems from this idea that I think that some of their beliefs are very harmful, and I live in the Bible Belt, and there's a lot of propaganda, like on signs and things around me that are very unpleasant. And there's churches virtually every corner that I'm surrounded by. Virtually none of the religious propaganda that I ever see is positive in any way. And they make it very difficult to like them. You know, I'm not really sure how to properly articulate exactly how I feel on this, but subconsciously, whether or not I would like to, I can't help but look down at other people who are Christian. And aside from therapy, which I think that therapy is wonderful in so many ways because it offers thought exercises where you can put yourself in another person's position. You can see that person's humanity. But on a subconscious level, there's some subtlety to prejudices that people have, especially if they've been traumatized by that particular group. So I'd like to know
Absolutely.
I'd like to know your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I would love to start with this. First off, thank you for your vulnerability and being honest with how you feel about this. I think a lot of people, especially on this show and the line in general, and a lot of the people in the audience that are viewing probably have a very deep understanding of what you're talking about. You know, I know many trans people in particular that would not be caught dead stepping inside of a church just for the sheer fact that it's not a safe space in most cases because of the way Christianity has been weaponized. And I think that's the most important thing to create the distinction about. Bad people will use anything they can to be bad people. And unfortunately, there is a lot of bad people that want to be discriminatory and hateful and grab the Bible and use that as their bludgeon, that use that as their weapon. And it is a complete tragedy that this is the way that Christianity has gone. And of course, we can know, and there's many people on the channel that know, like, there's a lot of philosophies and understanding around religion is very exclusionary. It's a lot of in-group thinking. It's a lot of group think. There's a lot of rituals and things that people do as communities that are inherently hateful and in a lot of ways. So, saying that, trans people are an abomination, or saying that queer people are the sin, and all of these type of things are incredibly traumatizing, and it can cause a lot of what you call religious trauma. However, I will also say that a lot of it is linked the same way that if someone is physically abused by someone and all of a sudden, like that, or even physically abused by many someones of the same thing, like if they're all men, for example, there are people out there who are like, oh my gosh, I can't trust men because I've been physically abused so much, and they have their defenses up naturally. It's the same thing with people who, have experiences, and, I like people, some people shape their entire worldview around a black person treated me bad once, so I can't trust anybody, or I was, and a crime was committed to me by an Asian person, so I can't trust, and a lot of people use those experiences to then, like you said, be prejudiced toward the entire group. And it is how our lizard brains kind of operate in a lot of ways, because like in our brains evolutionarily are trained to be like, oh my gosh, there was a snake in the bush that almost bit me one time, so I can't trust jumping in the bushes because there may be snakes in there. And that is a very important survival mechanism that lets humanity survive and thrive, to know that they shouldn't be jumping in bushes with deadly snakes in them. And unfortunately, that same lizard brain point of view happens to people in groups, which is unfortunately not rational, right? It's just not rational. And it's an unfortunate thing. But like, you may say, okay, I'm prejudiced toward religious people because a lot of them have been mean to me, is still an irrational thought, because there's plenty of religious people who feed the poor, who are able to leave drug addiction because they have the ability to kind of like think about that in their way. That's their anchor, that's their meditation. There are people who use prayer as the only quiet moment they have in their day, and they just don't know any other way to feed that spiritual thing that they have in their bodies. But they're actually genuinely good humans that are actually like, they're not there for the discrimination. They're there for the peace and solitude and whatever sanctuary that they get from it, right? I know a lot of people who are Wicca, who are just like, I believe in my cards, or I believe in the stones around me because they give me sanctuary and a sense of calm and foundation. But regardless if it's true or not, it's what they find that gives them grounding, right? And so I think it's important for us to be able to kind of like lift our minds up and be like, is this thing rational? Is it rational for me to consider an entire group bad because of the fact that I've been treated bad? Now, if you're talking about the KKK or Nazis, sure, it's a pretty rational opinion to say, yeah, this person says they're a Nazi, this person says they're a Klan member, and they believe in the lynching and murdering of human beings on a mass genocidal scale. Yes, those are bad people. But like, if you're talking about people who are, in a religious congregation, and they're just like sitting there in their church because they've been trained to go to their church every day of their lives because that's how they're trained to be, well, not everybody in that room is bad. And so that's kind of the way that I kind of look at it, because it's very easy to be like, you are taught terrible things in that church, so therefore you hate me. It's okay to have your guard up, but it's not okay to just be like, I hate you, I don't want you to have rights, or I don't want you around me, or I don't want you in my space. It just depends on how you want to confront that. But yes, I deal with religious trauma myself. I'll just go ahead and say that. But it did take a lot of work on my part to not be prejudiced, because people have the right to freedom of religion. And I truly believe that. And yeah, that's kind of how I have to say it. I don't know, Robin, if you want to respond to that, and then we can let Lux go.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I'd be
Robin?
interested to hear what Lux has to say before I jump in.
Sure.
Well, well, I don't know if you want my response on this because okay, so I agree with a lot of what Josie said. I just want to say, like, I don't completely disagree with Josie that, like, if one person harmed you, it would not make sense to hate all of that group. But like, maybe I've known of women who have a service dog, and the service dog's job is to prevent men from getting anywhere near her because she has trauma around men, right? So like, I think that this all is on a scale of severity, right? And I think that there's a difference between saying, like, I have a mild prejudice toward this group versus saying, like, I think that you shouldn't have the religious liberty. So, like, where I tend to fall on this is all Christians have something in common that I don't want to be personally very close to, which is a willingness to set aside critical thinking for the sake of preserving their faith. Or I guess the one way in which I think of it that makes me a little bit more compassionate is that most of us were not raised with critical thinking skills. I don't know what happened to me that I have critical thinking skills because it's not like my parents taught me to think critically about religion or anything. I don't know what happened that has given me some unique ability to like weigh things in a way that's more like I care more about the facts. Like, what is it about me that led me to be a skeptic who prioritizes facts and data? And like, what is it about me that makes me willing and able to change my mind when confronted with new information? It seems like statistically that's really uncommon as a human trait. So to some extent, like, I feel like maybe a lot of these people didn't choose to believe the stuff that they believe. Like, they don't have the skills to be as engaged as I am in deducing what is true, or like maybe they're prioritizing that feeling of of sensing that you're connected to something or whatever. Like, I know that there is a particular psychological mechanism that kicks in when you have a collective experience. You can experience that at a concert, though, not necessarily having to do it at church. We've got these like secular humanist organizations that do Sunday meetings that you're getting a lot of the same kind of stuff, like a motivational speech and a togetherness and singing together and stuff. So like, clearly these things can be, you can get them somewhere else. But like, I do have a prejudice against religious people. And even though I know that non-religious people do the same things, like I see people in the chat talking about how like their family was transphobic and abusive and they were all an atheist family. So like, those types of thinking are not exclusive to Christians. It's just that it's like easy to point to, I think, maybe is part of why like a prejudice has formed around it. And also because like at this point, religious people are not capable of saying anything original. Like, that's part of why I got bored with atheist activism back in the day, is because I was like, oh, we're just going over the same talking points. Same thing with trans issues, is nobody can fucking say anything new on any of these subjects, apparently. So the lack of originality, the lack of original thought, like the seeming lack of skill in applying critical thinking, I find it difficult. And like, I want to say too that there is a difference between like, I don't want you in my house versus like, I don't want you next to me at the homeless shelter volunteering, right? Like, I can build coalition with people who believe weird shit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to like have an up close and personal conversation. But and this is not just Christian people. I want to say this too. I do the secular pagan thing, and I don't really want to talk to other pagans because I think that they're going to be more in it than I am, and then that's going to freak me out. So I don't want, and when I was still trying to like date or like hang out with queer people, like for that kind of reason, I went and hung out with this girl, and her roommate was like, let's do your star chart. And I was like, no. I was like, I am not comfortable with this. It's too weird. There's value in tarot, but it's not because it's going to magically tell you anything, right? So I like understand where you're coming from. And it's like, how much do you really need to work through that versus how much are you able to just kind of accept that you don't want those people really personally close to you? Like, I don't necessarily think that there's an inherent problem with not wanting to be besties, or like my marriage would not have worked out if my husband was religious, right? There is no amount of compartmentalization that would have made that work out. And we didn't discuss it before we got very serious in our relationship. So I'm lucky in that way. But like, yeah, there is, it's like, there are queer friendly churches. The messaging overall for Christianity is pretty bad. So like, even when I think of pro queer churches, I'm like, you still believe in the dumb shit. I kind of want you to go away, actually, because if anything, you're preventing queer people from getting away from the stupid ideas of the religion. And you're trying to make this like space where it's still okay for you to do both. And I almost kind of resent those churches for that work, because I think that people should be not Christian. So yeah, I think it's okay to be a little prejudiced sometimes. And as long as you're not like, as long as you're not saying like, I hate Christians and I will refuse to work with you and I want you to get fired for being Christian. Like, there's a scale of severity here. And I think it's okay to be a little bit prejudiced. I'm a little bit speciesist, like that's why I'm not a vegan. Like, a little bit. I know.
Shame.
I know.
Shame.
I know.
Shame.
I was going to say, is perhaps lingo that you could get behind prejudice not with malicious intent? Is that perhaps better? Like,
I think that a lot of
so
these
it's okay to
terms
be
are
guarded around.
sure. Yeah. I think that a lot of these terms are stigmatized because of the context we typically use them. Like the term discrimination is primarily used in a context of alienating people, denying them their rights, right? But discriminate just means being able to tell the difference between two things. Like, I discriminate between the two different types of chips because one of them has flavor and the other one doesn't, right? So, and the word propaganda and the word prejudice, like you can dismiss a case with prejudice or without prejudice. And so that's like a different context in which we use the same word. So yeah, like I just think that typically we use prejudice as like, and you're keeping the black people from being able to ride the bus or whatever. Like, and that is a form of prejudice. It's just an extreme form of prejudice. So if you're like, I'm a little bit judgmental, which is kind of what it means. Like, I'm a little judgmental of Christians. Like, okay, I think I can understand an endeavor to be less judgmental about things in general, but I also understand why you're judgmental of Christians. And like, I don't think that that thought process is necessarily invalid, you know?
Absolutely. So I have a number of thoughts.
Sure.
So one thing that you said, Lux, that really stood out to me was when you said belief is not a choice. I'm
Yeah.
gonna try to keep that in mind whenever
Mhm.
I'm interacting with these people, because I'm going to try to remind myself that what these people believe, they believe it with sincerity, and their belief is not a choice. If they could believe in
Mhm.
something else, perhaps they would, but that's just the way that they believe. So I definitely think that was a pearl of wisdom. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
One
So,
thing that I particularly
Mhm.
like. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please. I
Were
would
you going to
prefer
say
you to
something?
go.
Okay.
No, go for it.
One thing that I really love about the line is, um, and there's like so many different programs on the line, but one thing that I really love about it is I get exposure to how some of these Christians think, and it like
Mhm.
really opens up some of the psychology behind why these people, even if they're not the most well-meaning, suffice it to say, why and how these people think the way that they do. I've
Mhm.
seen. I would, in a moment, I would like to get your thoughts. I've seen videos online where people put themselves in situations where they're around demographics of people that they may not necessarily like, and they do it as a way of like sort of building their tolerance to it. In a way, I kind of think that the line does that to some extent, because um, everybody on the network seems to have really thick skin and can, take people who everybody seems to have really thick skin and be healed and able to deal with religious folks. And I think that the best way I could describe it, what would be your thoughts about like somebody who hasn't fully healed, putting themselves in that sort of situation where they're maybe not around the most tolerant people, but they do it for the sake of like trying to strengthen their psyche, so to speak. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And I thought I would add this as well. This is just an interesting tidbit. I'm not exactly sure what the statistics are for people who join or convert to other religions after leaving Christianity. I am an atheist in terms of the biblical God. I do not believe in a supreme creator deity. And if that's what constitutes an atheist, I am, however, someone who I consider myself spiritual, but I'm a Buddhist and I don't believe in God. And my ideas of spirituality are going to be very different than other people. To preface, when I'm talking about prejudice, I don't have prejudice at all towards people of other religious backgrounds. It's only Christians more specifically, and it's, I think, just because I was traumatized by it. So,
Right.
yeah, I'd love your thoughts.
So, since we were using, I think we were using Latin phrases earlier, I like to say the word tabula rasa, which is blank slate, when I try to interact with people. And it is a practice that, it takes practice. It takes practice to meet people where they are, no matter what their backgrounds are. And it does lend you to confront things that you probably confronted that may not be great. Like if you were to take the tabula rasa approach with every human you meet and you're in a congregation or a church in the South and you were like, I'm going to talk to these people and I'm just going to take them at blank slate value where you don't know anything from anybody of these folks, there's a possibility that you're going to run into people who have shitty views and are people that you probably don't want you to be your friends. And however, in that group of people, there might be some really cool humans that are just like, wow, like you actually volunteer at the old folks home every week, like, and you actually like know all of these stories, and it's like, so there's like the beauty in humanity, I guess, in a sense that does come out of that, and it's not easy. It's not like if you were, like I would. Let me be 100% clear of my own failure here. If I was in a group of a bunch of red hats, and they're all wearing their MAGA hats, it's going to be real hard for me to take that approach when I'm like running and talking to those folks. I'm going to be like, you're like wearing a Klan hood. I'm like, but in theory, there may be people in that space that are just going to be like super cool and they don't understand why they're wearing the MAGA hats. They're just like, those are my friends and they're all doing the group thing. So I'm just hanging out with them, but you're cool. Because that is a true possibility of how things go. And it really depends on how you want to approach life. It's more philosophical than anything. Essentially where you're just like, how close do you want to get with other people's experiences and based on their own personal beliefs, versus, and not having that prejudgmental approach. And you may meet somebody new. And for me, I think humanity is beautiful regardless, because humanity will always surprise you, even though they're trying to snuff out my existence. A lot of them are, but in reality, I think there's a lot of beauty in that. And if I walk through the world completely avoiding most segments of society, then I would miss out on some of those diamonds in the rough. And so that's kind of how I approach things, but it's really a personal preference. Like I'm not going to go into a church and say, hey, who wants to be my friend? Because I would rather go into a community group that have a little bit more like point of views, because I'm probably going to find more people that are already on that path of how I feel about, critical thinking, my existence, things like that are probably a little bit easier. I would probably go into that space that is more familiar and be like, hey, let's have game night at my house. Where if I was in a church, I wouldn't be like, hey, let's have game night at my house. I would be a little bit more reserved on that. And I would be, I think, and I think that reservation is not, I don't think it's prejudice. I think it's just like who are my people? Who are the people that I get along with? Who are my friends? Who are the, and I'll say this right now. One of my best friends that I work with is religious. She wears a cross around her neck. And we continue to have friendships. I have her over for game night. She's a dear friend of me. I would die for this woman. She's incredible. I love her. But she doesn't throw that cross down my throat. She doesn't say believe or die, and she's a trans woman. And just yesterday I was fighting against an anti-trans sports bill here in Maryland, and on the panel that was on the side of getting rid of the ban was a trans religious minister, and a Black trans man. And he was there because he knew that there were conservative religious people in that space that needed to hear a message from a minister about the fact that trans people should have the right to exist. So for me, I love that person. That person's great. They love me, and they're not trying to convert me, because I literally said, I'm the godless atheist on this panel and I don't care. Right. And he laughed. He didn't say, "Oh my God, Josie, that's terrible. Let's have a ministry about it." So I guess I've just had enough interactions with really good humans that I don't judge them by their beliefs. I would love to have conversations with them. I'd love to have a conversation with my friend about how deep the religion goes for her. But I just have never gotten around to it because it just hasn't come up. So I think that's the way I approach it. It's a practice. It's hard to start, especially when you have trauma, which I do. I have religious trauma, deep religious trauma.
If I may, can I ask you a question very quickly?
Sure. Yeah.
It's whenever you mention the cross necklace, there's certain visual cues like that whenever I'm first meeting people, in which I admittingly will, the prejudice starts to kick in. I instantly have these negative feelings associated with them. When you develop this friendship, right, did it take a certain amount of time for you to become desensitized to the religious imagery that she would wear, or things of that nature around her? Because I know that everybody has different triggers, and I'm just curious about if that ever like bothered you, or if there was ever a time where that would bother you.
I would say that for me at the time, it was easy for me to look past because we were the only trans women on staff at the time. And it was more important for us to have trans femme solidarity than the imagery of the cross. Because for me and her, it was like, girl, you're my sister in this organization. We need to talk about trans misogyny, and that's where our relationship started. And I think that overtook anything about the beliefs of her, personhood. She's still she's still a leftist. She's incredibly brilliant in policy. She has deep relationship with her wife, and she is always, giving me the gossip and the tea about the community and stuff. And so for me, it's like that came first. And it was really interesting because we were at a big queer event called Creating Change, which is like one of the largest events for queer people in the country annually. And she was talking about how she went into there was like a place that was designated for people who are spiritual and religious of all religions in the group. And there was like this, like, it was almost like an altar for all religions, for all people to come and find quiet and find their own spirituality. And she said that when she walked into that space, everybody kind of darted eyes with her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. And she's just like, "Oh yeah, I'm wearing this." And she held her hand on her necklace with the cross, and she actually felt the prejudice. And I'm like, "Well, that sucks. You're a great human. I love you." And it was like one of those things where I felt it in reverse for her. I actually empathized with her that there were people that would not give her the benefit of the doubt that she's a great person just because she was wearing a cross. And a lot of the people in there were spiritual, but not in a Christian way. And there was like people who are Muslim in the space and everything like that, but she actually felt like the other in a space that was designed for queer and trans people. And I felt for her. I did, because usually it's the other way around, but for me, I felt the compassion and empathy for her in that situation. So that made me understand better of like, I should not judge people by the iconic imagery that they wear. So I wear a lot of like crystals on my because I like the way they feel, because they're heavy. I like heavy pendants. So I have like rose quartz, tiger's eye. I have like so many different like, amethyst. I love crystals, but they have no religious connotation to me whatsoever. I just like the way they how much they weigh on my, and I like the way they shine and reflect in the light. But people have come up to me, it's like, oh, that's a rose quartz crystal. What does that mean to you? And I'm just like, it's pretty. Like, and and so for me, it's like I even get that, and I'm not even spiritual. And so I think sometimes we have to take a step back and think about how we are coming up to people, and then go back to that thing of tabula rasa. We don't know what people are dealing with on the other side, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is actually have an open and deep conversation with them.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That was
Mhm.
really, that really resonated with me a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's a practice.
Well,
We all can get better.
yeah, and I have trans friends on the internet that are Christian. Not one. I have one that I'm closer with. Maybe it might be good for me to try to build a relationship with her, and maybe maybe by making a positive, supportive friendship with somebody who is a Christian, it'll help it'll help me work through some of my prejudices.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100%. But again, there's nothing wrong with keeping your head on a swivel, right? There's nothing wrong with being able to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm not walking down that dark alley." Right? Like, so just know that you being vulnerable and opening yourself up is a good step, in my opinion. This is my opinion. And being able to build relationship with other people and their other beliefs makes it easier for you to empathize with other people who are just not there yet. Everybody's in different journeys, right? I always joke around and say, everybody's vegan, they just don't know it yet. I joke around like that all the time, right? Because like I walk around the world as a vegan for 9 years, and most people around me are not vegan. And a lot of people have preconceived judgment on me just because of my veganism. So, and I have most of my friends are not vegan. So for me, I have to be able to communicate and love people around me, even though that they're not vegan, and they're on different parts of their journey. If they aren't vegan yet, maybe they will be later, but it's not my point to judge and say, "Hey, you're gross, you're a terrible human because you're eating meat." It's like, I used to eat meat. What can I say? You know what I mean? So for me,
Hmm.
it's kind of like, that's kind of how I look at it as well, is that, in a lot of ways, I'm an outcast. I'm polyamorous, right? I'm trans, I'm queer, I'm vegan. There's so many things. I'm atheist. So I'm more often the outcast than the people who are I'm communicating with most of the time. So I come at it from that approach. I don't want to be treated as an other. So why should I do that to others?
Yeah, of course. Everybody, the golden rule, everybody should ideally treat other people how they want to be treated. In an ideal
Yeah,
world, though.
exactly. In an ideal world, like I said, it's practice, right? I would not be comfortable going into a group of red hats, right? And I just wouldn't.
Hmm.
It would be hard for me, and I have a lot of trauma
Yeah.
there, like we all do. So I'm human too. And so even in those situations, I can't be perfect in like this tabula rasa belief. Now, will I continue to practice it? Yeah. but I'm also trying to be safe too. And that's my prejudice saying that, because technically I probably am safe. But honestly, in my opinion, I don't want to commune with those people. I don't, that's kind of where I'm at, but that's me being prejudiced. So even though I'm trying to say, oh yes, be empathetic, try to love everybody equally, I still don't do it myself for certain groups because of the trauma. So we're not all perfect. And so it's like, you just got to practice it.
I want to make my last comments, and then I'll give Robin your last word, and then we are going to wrap up and move to our last caller because we're getting close to the end of the show today. I just wanted to add that, like, I think it's a good idea to strive for something like tabula rasa. If somebody is wearing something, that is a form of communication, which means that is the first line of the conversation is the MAGA hat or is the cross. MAGA hat, you're saying a lot with the MAGA hat. I think with the cross, you're only saying one thing. So maybe some way that can be helpful here is to think is to try to frame it as a value neutral, and it's only saying one thing. It only says this person believes that Jesus Christ is their savior or whatever, or like they believe in God.
Yeah.
Like it only says I believe in God. It doesn't say I agree with the Old Testament. It doesn't say I agree that prostitutes are cool. Like it doesn't necessarily say anything else aside from like I believe in God. So just starting with that as like a value neutral statement, like this person, or even if you want to take it all the way back to just the simple fact, this person is wearing a cross. No further value judgment, no further storytelling around what that means. This person is wearing a cross. Maybe this person is Christian. And then that, like, letting that be where that thought process stops. And then that can give you the opportunity, if you're interested, to have a more nuanced conversation of openness to getting to know what else that cross might mean to that person. Because that person might be someone who volunteers at the homeless shelter and donates a lot of their money and gives to good works. Or they could be a member of the KKK. And just starting to take the judgment out of that initial meeting could help if you just try to reframe it as like that it just is a cross, that is a necklace that they are wearing. So and then my follow-up is, I don't think that every prejudice is a problem that needs to be solved. But I think that you're on a good track with Josie. You guys have come to a great mutual understanding here. And I want to give you your last word, Robin, and then we're going to go ahead and move on for today.
I want to thank you both so much. I really don't have much more to add or contribute, but I'm definitely going to be listening to this back and really analyzing it. This has been really eye-opening, and I just want to thank you both for your time. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Robin.
it. Call us back sometime if you end up making some progress with this, because maybe I need to learn from your experience that this maybe is a prejudice that I should try to get over. But yeah, thank you so much for calling in, Robin. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Somebody in
so
chat
we have
was like,
one caller
what if you
left.
just love
Yes.
lowercase t's? What if your name starts with a T and you just love the lowercase t?
That's true. T is for trans.
Yes, T is for trans.
Yep. Yeah, that's an interesting. I tried to be helpful, even though I'm like, is this really a problem that needs to be solved? But can you consider it a problem that needs to be solved? I'm going to try to help you out where possible. So I don't want to discourage her too much. So I'm glad that you have this like much stronger reaching out kind of position, and I think that's why you're so good at your job. I think it's one of the things that makes you so effective is your ability to work with people who differ from you. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Just so y'all know,
All
we're
right,
going to take
last
this
call.
last caller and then we're moving into super chats, but don't forget to get your votes in. You can vote for what punishment we're doing and also vote for who's going to be the winner or loser with your $5 super chats of hashtag Team Lux or hashtag Team Josie. Make sure you include the hashtag or it doesn't count. But yeah, with all that said, we're moving on to our last caller, who is called Faye, who uses she, her pronouns in Utah, is asking
They.
Josie for
They
some
pronouns.
advice. She, they. Sorry, I can't fucking read, it turns out. Anyone who wants to ask Josie a question. So welcome to the show. How's it going? Let us know what's up today.
Hello. So sorry. So I'm in the middle of a custody situation, and I was told by a mediator. He's a lawyer. He worked a lot with the judge that's in this situation, and when I picked up the Zoom call, I was presenting female and or presenting as a woman, and he explained to me that this particular judge is very conservative, and though he can't legally hold it against you, I can't say that it wouldn't sway his decisions and things, given that you have your hair up in a pretty little ponytail and earrings and chokers and whatnot. Just the way that you're presenting I feel that it would sway his decision, is what the mediator told me. And so I'm just curious if there's any way that you know of to identify and...
So it was the mediator and not the attorney?
Correct.
It was the mediator? So the mediator gave you that advice? That's interesting. Because usually when you have an attorney, they give you that legal advice, but this is the mediator. That's very interesting. Did the mediation? I've been in a custody battle before with one of my partners. So my question is, did the mediator already submit their recommendation?
Yes, it was more or less settled in mediation for right now. I'm just curious to if you know of any way to combat that, to basically identify it and call, for lack of a better term, call the judge out on the blatant bigotry.
Got it.
No. I don't think so. If you want a favorable decision, then no is the answer.
Yeah, so this is a very difficult situation. So first off, so it looks like both parties that are dealing with this custody battle have agreed, both of you have agreed with what the mediator has said. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay, well that's a good thing, right? So there's no
mediation.
Okay. So first off, congratulations on getting a mutual, understanding with the mediation and with both sides agreeing, because that's usually the hard part, right? Now, if you were having if you had a different point of view and you both didn't agree to the mediator's decision, then it would be even more sus, right? Because then it's like, then somebody can win something, somebody can lose something. So in this case, it seems like it's going to be a mutual rubber stamp decision, which is incredibly important. Is that what I'm getting there? So it seems like both parties agree with the mediation's decision. The judge is that right? I just want to double check, because I'm not an attorney, so I'm not providing legal advice. Okay, great. So okay, so that's good. Honestly, in that case, it's almost like the mediator is just trying to kind of be an asshole, unfortunately, in the sense of, there's a lot of people who are like, they have a lot of like legal decorum situations. So if you were to go to the courtroom and you were wearing a tank top and you were like not, dressed formally, and you weren't like you didn't have professional attire, then that could, like, oh my gosh, you're not following the rules of decorum in the courtroom. You're not respecting the judge. So therefore, I do believe you should wear something formal, even if it's femme or not. Like, you should wear, a nice dress, What was that?
Yes, of course, professionalism.
Yes, professional. Be professional, right? You're in court. Like, wear a nice dress or something, or wear, a
I would
pantsuit,
not
or
wear a choker. Just as my advice, I would not wear a choker
yeah,
in that environment.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. If your hair looks good down, do it down. Don't put it like in a messy ponytail. Things like that. That's more like just advice of the courtroom, and you can follow that if you choose to. The question then becomes: is it your femme presentation that is the problem, or was it the fact that you were wearing a choker situation? Is the question, right? Because there are some judges out there. It's like, you don't even care about this case. You're wearing a tank top in here. How dare you? And they get like really persnickety and uppity about it, and that's really frustrating. But that's the way it is for a lot of these cases, and that's kind of how it goes. I would say that the judge themselves are going to be the arbiter of what you have to say. I will say that they're not going to be dumb in most cases of being like, you're just a tranny and da 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 da. Like, they're not, if they do that, then you have a case of discrimination and da 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 da. And sorry for using the slur, everybody. I'm just myself. I'm so sorry. I don't usually say that word, but I'm referring.
We love slurs on this channel. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyways, I'm a trans girl. I can say it. I have permission. I'm being the most hyperbolic on this situation, but I would go in with the idea of like, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Answer the questions and do all of those type of things. Now, if they confront you and are like, "Why are you dressed that way?" That then it becomes a little bit, well, this is how I dress formally. And you just move on that way. In a lot of ways, like, the transphobia from a judge is less likely because the judge is just trying to get you out of there, because they have a whole ledger of cases that they're trying to do. So it's like, okay, the mediator agrees. You both agree with the mediator's decision. Okay, we're good. All right, great. There's no disagreement. Okay,
Should be
great.
quick.
All right. It should be fast, and but if there's opposition, that's when the arguments start, and that's what the things go. So it's a tough one. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice. But it would be something that is it's a tough one. Just dress formally, look cute. I that's really all I can say. Does that help? I'm sorry. I'm sorry if the T-slur offended you.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. Not knowing the situation, not knowing what's going on, you're not going to be able to give any solid advice in either direction. But the mediator did happen to outright say, this man is very conservative, and with you presenting femininely, it might sway his decision.
But what decision he has to make is like, yo, yes, we're gonna just go along with the plan that you guys have already made. Like, is he going to say, actually, I've decided that you can't do shared custody. You can't be the parent at all, right? Like, is he gonna fundamentally change the nature of the agreement that you've already come to in mediation, and thus spend more time in his courtroom deciding this? Like, or is it more likely that he's just gonna push it through and be like, get the fuck out of my face?
Yeah, at this point, with us coming to an agreement during mediation, he's probably just going to push it through. But the mediator was basically trying to warn me, it feels like, that if we can't come to some sort of agreement in this, and it does get pushed into a full-on trial, then it might be held against me.
This is a tough decision. Is your change already legal? Is your name actually like legally changed to Faye?
No. unfortunately.
Okay.
And I mean, I can still present masculine. Like I can even drop down my voice to my
Yeah.
original born voice.
Yeah.
But
This is what I will tell you, Faye. This is what I want to say this. You need to do what is best for your child.
of course,
And at the end of the day, that is your ultimate decision. Like I said, I'm not an attorney, but at the end of the day, like if you truly feel that there's a possibility that this judge is so transphobic that they're going to withhold custody of you regardless of the agreed mediation, then you need to do whatever you can do to make sure that you get to have custody of your child. And we are in a world right now where people are having to make hard ass decisions. Right now, veterans are having to pretend that they're cis so they can continue to get their hormones right now. Like this is the world that we're in right now. And it's not easy. And this is going to be 10 minutes of hell. If you can do that, then do it. If you don't want to, then don't do it. It's really about the fact that your decisions and how you interact is about you and your child. And you know, you might have to be a mama bear and do it. And it's really up to you. I would also talk to another attorney and try to get an opinion from an attorney in Utah that knows that court, and be like, is this going to be so much of a problem that I should do this? But I would not use this opportunity to try to call out the judge when the judge literally has the future of your child in his hands. And that's what I would say, because this is more than just you. This is somebody else that you love dearly, and you need to do whatever you think you need to do to make sure that it goes the way that it goes. And I would talk to your ex about it too and see what they think. Because if you both agreed to the mediation, there's some agreement there, and you should think about and see if, like, is this the way you're going to go? So that's all I can say, because I'm not an attorney and I don't know the courts there and I don't know the laws. So I know that may not be the best thing, but I would definitely highly not recommend going after the judge and trying to call him out.
for sure.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense? Yeah. I know
Absolutely.
it's not an easy world for us right now. It's shit. It sucks.
Yeah, being ran by a tyrannical toddler.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. But remember, this is going to be 30 minutes of your life that will determine the future with your child. So it's about what decision you make with that. Okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
luck.
thanks for calling,
I
Faye.
wish the best.
Call again if, let us know how it goes. Hopefully it goes well. So we're wishing you luck for sure. And yeah, all the best. However you decide to go with that, all the best.
Absolutely. I will be in touch. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye, Faye. Okay, so
That's hard. That's
now
rough.
it is. I mean, I got a new driver's license in a state where I could have gotten an X, and instead I had it match my birth certificate, because I'm like, well, this document doesn't really say anything about me as a person. It's just going to be whatever is easiest for any document changes that I go through in the future. If I get a passport, if I see a cop and they pull me over and whatever, is like, it's not fun to have to make that decision. But we all have to do whatever is consistent with like a happy life. So
That's right.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. So we are ready to get stuck into our super chats. I really need to fill my cup of water. So would you like to get us started, and I'll come back in a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
As I drink
Showing
it
off.
right in front of you. Yeah. $5 from Zerith Moonpaw. Hashtag Team Josie. Bards for the win. Charisma casters. Yes, let's go. Honestly, like, I just started my D&D game like I actually have a party and I'm actually running D&D now. One of my goals for the year has been done. I'm so excited.
Okay, I can hear now.
Yes.
$5 from Pipplepunk. Thank you. Half Dog, Half Canine says, how to deal with being super dysphoric, but also desperate for intimacy. Hashtag Team Josie. Oh boy. I mean, get
Yeah.
creative. You know? He kept interrupting me, but it's like, you can do oral, you know? You can just do other kinds of sex that don't involve getting someone
I
pregnant.
know. There was a
yeah.
lot going on with that call, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to talk about it more in depth in a minute because a couple of super chats came up that I was like, I think that will be a
Okay,
good
for sure.
opportunity to kind of share some final thoughts about the David call. But thank you, Pipplepunk. We
Okay.
appreciate your dono.
£5 from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern. Our bodies may relate strongly to our personhood in a given capacity, but our personhood is not beholden to our physical bodies. Yes, I think this was in
True.
relation to our first call. Yeah.
$5 from Tubian323. Thank you. Said, for people who said yes to today's question, say you don't know what fraud is without saying you don't know what fraud is. Yeah, I'm going to be very curious between this week and next week what the comments on the community post are because I don't understand what people are saying.
Yeah.
Oh well.
$10 from Jason Jones. Paul's Valley, Oklahoma will have our first Pride event this June 1st. Congratulations. I'm excited about this. Jimmy, go fuck himself. Good Cracker Lux Flex is getting swole. Well done. Using all
Censored.
these 200 letters. Yeah, censored. Censoring the guns.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
I do it.
Too dangerous.
My stream goal. When we get to $100 on my stream goal, I pull out the guns. So censored. You can't look at them.
Yes.
Thank you for the $5 from Paige McLaughlin, who says, science denial in the name of right-wing belief. I am shocked. So shocking. So surprising. Yeah. It is what it is.
$5 from Pebble Punk, half dog, half canine. Figuring out my gender was like putting together a puzzle with missing pieces. The pick beneath was always there. It just didn't make sense for a while. Oof, yeah. Feel
That's
that.
a great analogy. Mm-hmm.
It is.
Thank you for the $5 from Sentient Tree. It's a solid username. Book recommendation written by a child psychologist, really good, called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Hashtag Team Lux. Ooh, I'll have to pull that one up and read it sometime in the future. I'm trying to read like a book a month. I'm like behind. I gotta catch up on January's book that I started reading.
Good goal. That's a good one. That's a good goal. Yeah,
it's good for sleeping.
$10.
Read before sleep.
Yeah. $10 from Jax to Cabe. Never can think of something witty, so here, just take my money. Non-binary. Hashtag non-binary. Hashtag Team Lux.
Sorry, my mouse just stopped working, so give me a second while I try to figure that out.
Cool.
Oh no,
that's always fun.
We're just stuck. Yes. Hey, you missed. I said that I finally put my my D&D team together, so I'm actually playing.
Nice.
I'm actually DMing a game. It's the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So it's like this like Feywild adventure. I'm like so excited. Like I've been needing to do this for a long time. And I love being the DM because it's like, because of all my voice training, I can be like, hi, like, the fairy out in the woods just super anxious about things, or the guard at the gate. Like, I can like do both, right? It's the whole way through. So it's a lot of fun that I get to play around with those voices. So
that is fun.
Yeah, good time. So as the mouse situation,
that it stays. Like that you can get the group to be consistent, because it's like you can get them together in the first place, but can you last like 4 sessions without losing someone?
So the trick that I had is there's like a signal channel for the building that I live in, and then there's like a queer signal channel that we have. And so in the queer signal chat for the building that I live in, I was like, hey, like wanting to start a D&D game. So they all live in my complex.
Okay.
So
that's convenient.
now I can just like beat down their doors if they don't show up to game night.
Yeah.
Okay, got us back.
Thank God. $5 from Melatonin Ale says public schools barely have funding for supplies. They're not out here transing the kids. They're just using the preferred names and pronouns. Hashtag Team Josie. Yeah, I felt that was our most productive call today, I think, was that gentleman who was not sure about kids transitioning. And like, I think that could be a very productive conversation moving forward. I know that you were like, let's dig down really into the like what you fundamentally believe rather than just focusing on this kids thing. Cause I think a lot of callers do that where they wedge in and say, yeah, I'm worried about the kids thing. But then they also reveal that they are on some level, like fundamentally not seeing trans people as the gender that we are. So I look forward to getting to dig into that a little bit further. But yeah, the schools are not out here transing your kids. They don't care.
Also, hashtag Team Lux has 2 points. If I'm going to win, I'm going to win clean, Arden. All right?
That's true. No ballot stuffing. 9.
Yeah.
Just giving me 9 votes, you know?
Yeah. $5 Canadian from Grace, 5769. My dad called me after I visited him and said, "Hey, so do you have something to tell me? Guess I'm out to my dad now." Hashtag Team Josie. Okay, well, it happened. We got that out of the way.
That happened to me too. My dad was like, "Hey, you need to tell me what's going on." And I was like, "No, I don't want to." Yeah, turns out you can't like ask your dad to buy you Axe deodorant without it being part of a pattern of things that he starts to get curious about.
Yeah.
Thank you for the $9.99 from Amish Bob, who says, there's a woman here in Georgia named Bella Bautista, who's the first trans woman to ever compete in the Miss Georgia USA pageant. It's Georgia, though, so unfortunately, my girl's getting a ton of hate. I'm rooting for her, though. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
heard
good.
about that.
She's
I heard.
brave. Yeah,
Yeah,
I hadn't heard about it.
good
So
for her.
news to me. Congratulations.
Yeah. $5 from is it Paige? I think it's Paige, right?
Yep.
McLaughlin? Okay, all right.
Yep.
It took fear of COVID death in 2020 to make me come out in my 50s. Oh, congratulations. I didn't come out. I came out a few months before COVID, but I totally know what you mean. Yeah, but I'm glad you got there. That moment of time separated is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for the $5 from Melatonin Ale, who says, support trans rights, but refuse to give pronouns. Call me a skeptic about the veracity of that claim. Hashtag Team Josie. Yeah. Like, I wish I had doubled in a little bit on this whole, like, why do you think it's disrespectful to ask for pronouns? Because that might have gotten us to cut through some of the bullshit on that call. But again, I want to
Are you talking about the
more on
David
that.
call or the one before that?
Yeah. No, David. Yeah. Because David refused
there
to
was
give
a lot
pronouns.
going on there. Yeah, I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
it was a little bit of trauma dumpy at the beginning. It was like a lot. Anyways,
I'll talk about it. There's another super chat that's going to be better for inviting conversation on this.
Okay, fair enough. I know I can't help it. I keep on going back.
I know. So did the chatters.
Yeah, thank you so much for the donation, Lena. David should advocate for full government child support if he doesn't want child support from sperm donors to exist. Hey, you know what? That's actually a good policy. I like that. Like, it's like the government just gives every parent money. Yeah, every parent gets a lot of money for the kid, regardless if the dad is around or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. $10 from Tinkerbell Bell 1980 says hashtag Team Josie. Thank you for your dono.
Yay.
But also, how dare you?
$10. Thank you so much, Ari Turner. Josie, you are a better human being than I am. My response to David would have been so much shorter and would have echoed Jasmine Crockett's message to Elon Musk. Hashtag Team Josie for today. Aw, thank you. Thank you for your donation.
Yeah. $9.99 from Namail Nameson says, I'm a straight white guy, whitest of whitest, straightest of straights, and I'm on your side, even past the bitter end. Also, Lux, if I may ask, what are your pronouns? I feel like we should just add it to the lower third, if it's possible, just to have hosts pronouns.
I totally agree. It's definitely on the list. We're trying to do some reworking of all the graphical stuff, but that keeps becoming the thing that gets bumped back months. So
We're busy. I'm
it's
sorry. We
coming.
have a lot of shit
It'll
going on
happen
in production,
eventually.
but yes, I use its pronouns primarily. I'm not gonna shit my pants if you call me they, them, or like frankly any pronouns. But if you're wanting to be accurate, I prefer its pronouns. Thank you for asking. That's very kind of you.
$10. Thank you so much from Eric A. Haman. Eric Hammond, no message. Hashtag Team Josander. Never heard that one. That one's an
No vote.
interesting. That's an interesting one. No vote. No vote. We no couple names for us.
No. Oh gosh. Thank you for the $5 from Aliashana Silverbow. Christians, God loves everyone. Also Christians, God hates the gays. Ain't no hate like Christian love. Hashtag Team Lux. Hashtag Team PNW. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you for the vote.
Yeah.
I wonder if we already went past the super chat that I thought I was going to use as a springboard to talk about David. Anyway.
Maybe.
I'll go back and check.
I think we might have.
I don't think we skipped one. I
$4.99.
think that maybe I just, when I read it initially in the chat, I was like, oh, that would be a good opportunity, but I'm waiting for the perfect one now, even though it wasn't the perfect one.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Gosh, it's like all those lefty voters. Anyway, it's $4.99
I
from
know.
Amish Bob. Oh crap, I forgot. Team Josie for life. Aw, especially since my daughter's name is Josie too. Yeah, good
Cute.
name. I approve.
Cute stuff.
Was the one you saw, Lex, Monkey a Typewriter about Sada's BS story?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Yeah, it's coming up. Got a few more before
Okay,
that.
good.
Okay.
Nice.
Don't forget my point. I see you, Arden. I see you.
Is this one mine? I think this one's mine. $10
Yes,
from Stephen G. Clinard says, am I the a-hole if I don't particularly care about one's gametes? Yeah, I guess that makes you the a-hole, right?
Yeah, I think that's
Not really.
right.
I'm joking.
Oh, that's too bad.
I know. Shame.
No, shame. $10 from President Starscream. I can't express enough how much I appreciate what y'all do here on the line and TACIS. By the way, what are your favorite non-avian dinosaurs? Hashtag Team Josie. Go ahead and go.
I mean, well, because that takes away the answer to I always say chicken. That's what I always say when people ask what my favorite dinosaur is. I say it's a chicken. Because then no one can be a dick to me. Because the answer, if you're asking the question in its context, is pterodactyls. But I know they're not fucking dinosaurs. So you pedants out here. But now you're saying non-avian dinosaurs. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to answer the question. Those are my two answers, though. Take your favorite. It's either chicken or pterosaurs.
That's fair. Whatever the Loch Ness monster one is, that's like my Lapras. Wait, that's a Pokemon.
Are you thinking of a mosasaur?
Maybe
mosasaurs. Yeah, I don't know.
I think those are it. I don't know. I think I named the Pokemon, but we don't talk about.
You did. Lapras is a Pokemon. Yeah, that is what you did.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah. You're too much of a nerd. D&D didn't make you too much of a nerd, but knowing the name of one Pokemon did. So just so you know, that's where we stand.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, this one's for you.
$5 Canadian from Grace 5769. Question for Josie: how can you grapple with coming out as trans in a family ripe with toxic masculinity, like the personified version of it? Well, considering I was the first born male sex assigned at birth in a Latino family, it didn't go well for a lot of my family. In fact, so much so that my biological father no longer speaks to me and just says that he has a dead son. So it's hard. It's tough. But you keep the family that's with you through it all, and you hold them close. So the people who go through it with you, those are the real ones. and chosen family. Those are the real ones. So don't be oh, it's hard to say this, but the way I kind of deal with it is don't be sad by the ones you lost. Be grateful for the ones that you kept. That's how I look at it. I'm so grateful for the family that stuck around and are now with me now. And fuck the people who left. They weren't good for me anyway. So at least that's how I cope. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but it's tough.
It's different for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Thank you. Says, I feel like once you've familiarized yourself with a religious dogma, judging its adherents' beliefs is Judas after judicial. Yeah, no, I get, no, that's a good point. Like prejudice means like judging without knowing, right? Whereas like, you're judging with knowledge. That's an interesting way to frame it,
That's a really good way to look at it. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Good one, Monkey at Typewriter. That's a head scratcher. Yes. $5 from Haley Granger. I have to get going in a few minutes. We'll catch up later. Hashtag Team Josie. Yay, let's go.
$5 from Marceline says, concussed kookaburras cascading cataclysmically concluded concave cacophony clicks caucus colloquial concurrence. That was not even hard. Were you trying to do a tongue twister? Because that was just a that's all that was.
It would have got me. $5
You're dyslexic. It's not the same.
Yeah, that's true. From Zereth Moon, Paul, $5. Dex or strength fighter? Should paladins be able to unarmed smite? Best skill in D&D? Oh my gosh. I am a big fan of Dex fighting. I think I love the ability to dodge, higher AC. Let's go. Like, hit me, try. And then should paladins be able to unarmed smite? That's dependent on the DM. You got to give me a good backstory. Like, give me a good reason why your paladin needs to have unarmed smite, and I will go with you there. Like, for me, I'm a DM that will let you play your backstory, but give me a good one. Give me a good reason. And best skill in D&D? Oh my gosh, there's so many good ones. I would say that. I'm thinking like, see, this is where it's like I'm such a bard, or it's like, yeah, it's being able to charm or persuade. Like persuasion is like, I don't know, that for me, I think that is the skill that I really enjoy a lot anyways. But yes,
it has the most possibilities. Persuasion is good.
Yeah, you get to do so much with it. You get to do and I love performance too. Don't get me wrong. Performance is great because you can distract everybody while everybody does the other thing behind the scenes. Like a good performance check is always great. And then I also like talking to animals, but that's just fun for flavor. Anyways,
Druid.
Yeah, anyway, exactly.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. This is the one. It says, gotta hand it to David. He was selling the saddest BS story I've ever heard from a troll, yet the fact of his trolling was still sadder. Respect the goat. So, like, I think that it is entirely possible that David was actually having, like, not quite a crisis, but something getting close to a crisis. It's just that the way that he came across was very disingenuous. And, like, the crying, it was either extremely real or extremely fake, right? I need to say, though, as someone who has BPD, if this is a person who's being honest about having BPD, that even though he said he wasn't in crisis, he was still caught in a cycle, assuming that he was being honest, right? Because the thing is, like, there is a potential answer to the question of, like, how do I have sex without worrying about my life being ruined? It was like a catastrophic thought process that he was stuck in, where he was like, if I have sex at all, then it's almost certain that she will get pregnant and that she will refuse to get an abortion, and then she will come after me for child support, right? It's a story that he's told himself, and it's a cycle that he's stuck in because every solution that you try to offer, he just shoots down. And this is when this is when people are not possible to reach. This is why people need therapy, is because you have to be able to actually recognize and identify that you're stuck in a cycle. And so, like, yeah, there is a woman out there who doesn't want to have a kid, who wants you to do anal instead, who is infertile. Like, there is a solution to the problem. And it's like every single possible solution, he comes up with an excuse why that doesn't work. Or like, I'm too afraid to do that. Or like, what if, yeah, he said, yeah, exactly. I know, Arden. Like, the idea that you could have sex with a woman and then like she might get pregnant even though you didn't put it in or whatever. Like, I don't know. Or like, do something
Yeah.
else. Like, I don't know how he would have responded to the idea of like, you could just have oral sex and like find another way to do it. So you still get the intimacy without worrying about the pregnancy part. But like, there would still have been something wrong with that, or it wouldn't have been good enough. There's always something when you're stuck in that place. So it's like, but you have to be able to recognize it yourself. I don't know if there was any world in which we would be able to help him with that thought process, because he didn't recognize it as a
We're not
problem.
trained clinicians. Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
trained. We're not trained therapists to be able to do it. And honestly, like, I actually do believe that the tears were real. Maybe I'm just failing my insight check here, and I don't know if
I can't
it's
say
kind of
for
like,
sure one or the other.
I can't say either. But the reason I say it is because because the pattern always never lets the other person respond. So I think it's probably the first time in a long time somebody's acknowledged the pain, right? And
Possibly.
when somebody acknowledges your pain and vulnerability of, the things that are around you, it's just a list, but it's actually real pain. And so when somebody acknowledges that, like, it really can, flood the vagus nerve with like, oh my gosh, this person actually sees me. And there's a lot there as well. So, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And maybe I just have more spoons for it. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I think whatever the situation, how we ended it was fine. It was just like one of those things. It's like, it's hard because there's a lot of people out there that are in a lot of pain right now, and for different reasons and different things. And it's like, I don't know. It's a tough situation. It's a tough situation for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there were just a couple of things that initially made me think bad faith. And so I kind of went on that basis of like my initial judgment, like the kinds of things that he was complaining about or the notes that our call screener made. I really do wish we had just tried to address the why do you think that it's a problem to ask for your pronouns, because I think that would have help us cut through whether he was being genuine or not. But I think, I don't know, man. It's going to be up to someone else's discretion if he calls back whether we let him in, because I really don't like the way that conversation went. I'm not sure how exactly it could have gone better, but I feel like almost like we were taken advantage of, or that your kindness was taken advantage of by a disingenuous person.
I think, and this is my read on it. I'll say this. I think that in conversations, you build rapport with people, right? And
Sure.
and regardless if a person is in bad faith at first, once you're able to build that rapport, I could tell that there was a lightening of the conversation, even though it was disgusting, of like, oh my gosh, a woman with a penis, all that type of stuff. I feel like there was a moment of levity in the way that the conversation was going. And it was more like, okay, let's bring down the energy of what you're saying, because it's kind of unhinged, because you're not regulating what you're thinking. And it's kind of all diarrhea of the mouth type situation. And it's kind of like, how much diarrhea of the mouth can we handle before we say, okay, that's enough? It's kind of like I felt like I built rapport, and what he thought was funny wasn't funny. And I think that's where we lost the conversational thread. And that's how it ended. It's kind of like, people who were kind of like those people, those edge lordy type of people think, oh, this is funny, I'm going to say it because it's the only interaction that I have in my inner, echo chamber. So I'm saying something that's funny, but it's not funny to other humans that, are not in that circle, right? Like,
Yeah.
So I think that's where it was going. And it was like the rapport was built and it just didn't build off right. And I think that's where it is.
I was waiting for him to do something that was worth dropping the call. Like, based on what, the conversation that we had with Arden off stream was just like, let's hope that this guy doesn't just drop slurs immediately. So I was just prepared to be like, I'm gonna drop him. So maybe that was a
Okay,
little reactive
for
of
sure.
me, but whatever. Anyway, moving on. This
It's
one's for
fine.
you, I think.
$5 from DaCosta. Five dono would mean learning different sciences. For now, Brontosaurus. Yes, because of Littlefoot. Hashtag Team Josie. I know, I love the little Brontosauruses, and so Brontosaurus and with legs or ones with fins. I don't care. I like them. They're cuties.
Mhm. 10
And by
euros
the way,
from
it was
Moro
hashtag Team Josie.
P82.
I see you,
Oh, that was
Arden.
hashtag Team Josie.
Yeah.
Josie, you really moved me with your display of empathy and self-control towards David. I was close to tears, and then Lux made me smile. So thanks to both of you. The line is full of beautiful people. Thank you.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're so worried about getting a girl pregnant, just have sex with a trans girl. Seems like a fucking easy solution to the problem that you're having. Anyway.
I know. Just
$20. Thank
breaking
you. That's
those
very generous.
transphobic barriers.
I know. It started us down a bad way, though. Like, I was making a joke, and then it got taken seriously, and that's where it all broke
Yeah.
apart.
Yeah.
Anyway, $20 from Mr. Boricua 10. Thank you. Says, Oi, David. Fancy. Oh my God. No, I'm not gonna. Oh, I want to do the
Do it.
accent.
Do it.
I'm gonna do it badly on purpose. Fancy an opportunity to put on your best bib and tucker. I love to hear you have a proper cold bruv. Or is that too much for you? What's my sunshine? Don't like an honest convo. Grow some bollocks. Hashtag Team Lux. I could have done
You
it better,
deserve
but
that
I
one.
decided to do it bad.
You
Thanks.
earned that few bucks. You earned it.
I did. I'm still gonna lose terribly, but that's all right.
Hashtag Team Josie is too strong. It's too strong.
You're
fine.
bringing it. I know.
Yeah.
Hard to compete.
$5 from Curse to Chaos. Howdy, comrades. Wink, wink. I've considered DIY for HRT for a little while because hashtag Team Anarchy Lux.
I will take that. I'll take hashtag Team Anarchy as a stand-in for voting for me. That's good stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. That's very generous.
Wow.
For the $100 from Red Shrek. Thank you so much. Says, can you please explain this proposed legislation in Texas targeting the trans community? If you're talking about the one that we discussed earlier, it's basically saying that a trans person is committing fraud if they use a gender marker aside from the one that they were assigned at birth, despite the fact that that is a gender marker that they acquired through a legal process. It seems like this is just posturing from an extreme right-wing Republican who many other Republicans don't even like, according to Josie. So, it is not likely to pass. But I think given the context of the recent trans travel ban and the fact that the reason that they're giving for that is that it constitutes material fraud, that this could be something that they try to do more or try to do elsewhere. But we have no idea like how it's going to bear out, and there's almost surely going to be a lawsuit anyway. So whether this is going to start materially impacting people's lives seems unlikely, at least in the short term. So,
however, for extra credit here for my there is a bill proposed to end gender affirming care for all trans people in the state of Texas, and that one is scary. So so that is a very real thing. Texas may be the first state to try to propose and get close to passing an actual blanket ban on hormone replacement therapy, all healthcare related to adults, which proves it's never been about the kids. It's always been about removing our existence and our ability to have healthcare at all ages. So yeah. Texas isn't great right now, and that's where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
And that's where the
bummer.
voice of God lives.
True. For now.
It's God's country. God's country. $10 from Mod. Yes, $10 from Mod. I am still working to get my legal name and gender change. I had to pay the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions to run a background check on me by check. Like that was it was the 70s. Man, I did not know that was a requirement. I had no idea. That's interesting. I'm going to talk to some of the attorneys at advocates to see what the hell's going on there. That's really interesting.
It's interesting too. Like, I wonder if all name changes in Minnesota are subject to that. It's like I understand the premise of wanting to ensure that someone is not trying to evade a warrant or something. But if
Yeah.
it's being unevenly
You're
applied, then that
charged
is a
for it.
problem. Oh, and if you're charged for it
Yeah.
too, it should be considered part of the
And it is
procedure.
like, do they do that? Do they do that for all like people who get married too?
Yeah, yeah,
Like that seems a little extreme. It seems a little
yeah.
extreme. So that sucks that you had to do that. I'm sorry.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter says, "Isn't a preference to deal with adults who do not maintain an imaginary friend just a standard? Oh, Josie, you're playing WBTWL. Great campaign. Hashtag Team Lux."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's judgmental for sure. Like, I'm not going to try to pretend like my desire to not be close friends with Christians is not like judgmental, because it is. It is a standard, and some people would say that it's an unfair standard or an unreasonable standard. And again, it's just like, do I really see this as a problem to solve? I'm not like unwilling to work with Christians. In fact, I was looking into helping with like the homeless population, and I think that I might have to work with a church in order to do that. Just because they have more robust services. A lot of public services to help with homeless people are underfunded. Huge homeless problem in California and all the way up the coast right now. So yeah, it's like, unfortunately, you might have to work with a religious organization, and we should be able to set aside our prejudices to work with people who are not like us. Like, I think that is a good thing to endeavor toward, even if I'm not addressing the prejudice in the first place. So that's just my where I've come down on that.
Yeah, for sure. PLN 25. So whatever the PLN monies are, from Pola. Oh, it's Polish. Okay, Polish $25. Thank you. Polish Supreme Court decided trans people don't need to sue parents to change gender markers and documents. Hashtag Team Lux. Well, that's good. That was a really interesting. I know a Polish trans woman myself, and she had to sue her parents to change the gender markers, even though her mother was completely fine with it. And it was like one of those things. So I'm glad that they have not done that really stupid thing that tie up the courts for no reason. It's really dumb.
Waste the court's
Good to know.
time.
Mm-hmm.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Thank you. Says, Lux, I fucking feel you. My heart's answer is Hatzagoteryx, largest flying animal by mass. Hashtag Team PNW. Hashtag Team Hashtag Team Pterosaur. Thanks for helping me cope. Yeah. I just think that flying animals are fascinating. I'm starting a whole series on my channel talking about dragons in media. So obviously I have to look at like how real animals fly in order to be judgmental of the CGI in my favorite movies. So, follow me over to Musing Moss for that.
I think that was a Lux point. I think that's a Lux point. Also, if you're looking in the dragon lore,
right?
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. Okay. Fair enough. In dragon lore, remember, Christianity had a dragon. Saint Augustine slayed a dragon. One of the saints in the Catholicism religion, because dragons are real according to God, or at least Catholics.
Yeah.
Maybe you should be Catholic, Lux. Maybe that's a sign.
That's true.
Maybe you could pray to Saint Augustine, the dragon slayer. But he was a dragon slayer, so it's actually not great. Why would you
I'm
kill a dragon?
ideologically
Seems like
opposed
something-
to that behavior. Yeah.
Dragon slayers? Yeah, that is bad behavior. You know what? You're right. The whole time, you're right. You need to be attacking Catholicism for their behavior of slaying dragons as iconic imagery for the Christian religion.
Yeah. Terrible PR.
Fucking dragon slayers. Screw them.
It's true. $4.99 from Sarah Wilson. Thank you. Says, actually, if a prehistoric animal swam or flew, then it wasn't a non-avian dinosaur. Don't blame me, blame the scientists, aka Forrest, hashtag Team Josie. Well, that's what I'm saying, is usually people are like, okay, what's your favorite like dinosaur? And I'll say pterosaur, and they're like, that's not a dinosaur. And then I say, okay, well then my answer is a chicken, because a chicken is a dinosaur. But then they said non-avian dinosaur, which means that I can't include chicken. And like, I got to pick a different thing. So yeah, neither of my go-to answers were applicable in that particular situation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, it was St. George, not St. Augustine.
St. George. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. I was corrected correctly in chat. I know, fuck that guy. you know? But the
Terrible.
fact that they made him a saint for killing a beautiful animal like a dragon is such good imagery of what the way
How
Catholicism is.
how could you do this? How
I
and
know.
why? How and why would you do such a thing as killing these majestic beasts? You can keep reading.
I
I'm gonna
know.
be struggling with this for
Okay.
a second.
$10 from Kitty Takia? Taki?
It's Kitty
Taki?
Tick.
Kitty Tick. Thank you. Oh my gosh. This is why I don't like dinosaur names right here.
Brachiocephalosaurus.
Thank you. Is the best dinosaur, LOL, hilarious dino with the best name, LOL, hashtag Team Lux. I don't know how long my road was till I walked it and found more. Life is figuring it out. Yep,
True.
it's true.
Pachycephalosaurus. That's a good one.
By the
$5 from
way,
Tinkerbell
yo,
Bell. Yeah. You have dragon
I
too?
have a dragon.
I have one
Yeah,
exactly
see?
like that, but it's a different color.
Isn't it great? I love it. It's been on here. It's been here the whole time, and people just never notice that I've had a dragon on my set the whole time. For shame,
It's
y'all.
like you, me, and Arden are all like slightly weirdly interested in dragons. This is a trans
Yeah.
thing, apparently.
Dragons are the
I think
best.
They are.
it
Okay, it's getting close to like 5:30, so let's get through this for
is.
Arden's sake.
Please.
$5 from Tinkerbell Bell 1980 says, I will never not love being able to unalive an enemy with vicious mockery. Hashtag Josie. True. Good stuff.
Good point. Yeah. Good one. It's fun to role play. Always a good go-to.
Mhm.
$5 from Melatonin Ali. My transphobic Mexican mother used my Arden mug for coffee. She doesn't speak English. Hashtag accidental ally. Let's get the numbers closer. Hashtag Team Lux. Look at you making a comeback.
I know. That's funny though. Like mom doesn't know that it says leave trans people alone. It's good
I
stuff.
love it.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Thank you. Says, don't get me wrong, Lux and Josie have the more reasonable and empathetic takes. I'm just burnt out on fashy idiots and I'm spoiling for a fight. No, I get it. Like, I have a lot less patience for people. I have a presumption of bad faith a lot of the time in these discussions. Obviously, it's my job on TACIS to not assume bad faith right out the gate. But no, I'm
Tabula
I don't do this
rasa.
for free. Yeah, I don't do this for free anymore. Like, this is my job. I'm not going to fucking argue with these people outside of this context.
Yeah, tabula rasa.
Yeah.
Blank slate.
We're trying.
It's my debate queen language. All right.
Mhm.
$9.99. Thank you so much from Poor Claire. At risk of sounding like a pick me, I will say I have noticed a lot of the issues David mentioned. I can't be consistent with my values, and I care about that. And not care about that. I don't know if feminist is an accurate label for me.
Feminism is interested in gender equity. It's not for women.
Mhm.
Like there is a
That's
a
right.
perception that that's the case, but feminism is the academic foundation from which trans rights conversations can occur, and trans rights conversations have to do with trans men and women and non-binary people. Feminists are the people I see talking about men's equity issues. It's just that men tend to like blame women and feminism for the issue of like, for example, men not being, I wish that I had an opportunity to say something about this. My dad was trying to get custody of me for years. My mom was overtly physically abusive. There were court records of that. There was an arrest record of that. And because women are considered the correct parent, whatever, like my dad had to fight for years to get custody of me. And it was only when my mom like was in a mental health spiral and couldn't function that she gave up fighting. And that's the only way that my dad got custody. So like the systems that harm men are typically the same systems that are made to harm women, and men just happen to be catching strays about it. Like I do think that there is something to be said about the domestic violence issue, that or even like sexual violence against men. Like yes, we should have more resources towards that, and making those resources more co-ed would also help trans people as well. And like, yeah, so obviously there are issues where, you know, men are attacked and they're laughed at, or men are not believed, or, you know, they're laughed at. And there's still this culture of like, if a teenage boy is like sexually assaulted by a female teacher, people are still like, oh, you get you get it, boy. Like you did
Yeah.
it. And it's disgusting, right? Yeah. So like obviously there are issues that negatively impact men, and I would like to talk about that. It's just hard to do when someone shoots at like 3 or 4 issues that you write at once and you pick up on at least one of them as being a disingenuous men's rights activist point.
Yeah, and that's why I said in that conversation, it's like, look, there's a lot of people in the chat that are wanting to hear some of these points and have us discuss it. It's like, but we're trying to have a conversation, and we need to have that conversation so your points can be made and we can have the deep conversation about that. And unfortunately it was just a spiral, like you said. And so like, I would love to talk about these things. It's just we haven't had good faith conversation and list that want to actually have these conversations. On Chewed Gum, I've had those conversations.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where it's like, unfortunately, we only can argue, or not argue, but have conversations with the people that we got that call in. So if you want to have conversations about these things, call.
Also,
We'll
I
have
said it in the Discord chat, but literally this past Tuesday on Chewed Gum, I was on with Alyssa. I filled in for Erica, and the topic of male loneliness came up. Literally this week on our show for women, we have talked about men. Like David is. That's why I don't think he's serious. He's full of shit and just thinks he's the victim everywhere he goes. But I think.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's like you're not paying attention. If you think that we don't talk about these things, if you think that feminists don't talk about these things, you're not paying attention. Anyway, $5 from Jamnico6, thank you, says hashtag Team Lux. I'd send in more super chat to even out the score, but I spent too much last night getting promised to cuss. She said fuck poop. Jokes, hashtag worth every dollar. Nice. That's fun.
Fair. $9.99, thank you so much. From Poor Claire, I have a lot of depression/anxiety attacks lately and can relate to David if they were serious. I think so. I'm also celibate for many reasons, including fear of hell, pregnancy, and disease. No, that's very. Yeah. Go ahead,
think
Lux.
that this is bordering on OCD. If you're like David and you're like, I literally can't even imagine having sex with someone, it makes me want to kill myself. Like, you have OCD. Like, that is, I can't say, I'm not a doctor, but like, if you are like, I literally can't even imagine engaging in intimacy because I'm catastrophizing the worst possible outcome, maybe you need therapy. Like, that's a problem. Like, that goes beyond like a normal level of anxiety about just like life. That's an extreme level of anxiety that you really need to be taking seriously and getting in treatment for, because that is not a proportionate reaction. Like, yeah, maybe you could get pregnant. Like, yeah, but like statistically, how likely is that? Especially if you're taking precautions, especially if you have the conversations. Like, have $800 set aside if it's really that fucking much of a problem. But yeah, I just feel like it's extremely disproportionate to be like, I'm celibate because I'm so afraid of potentially getting an STI or getting pregnant. Like, go to therapy.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. It's like, when we catastrophize, that's why we seek help and therapy and everything like that. And I think all of us can find, things in our lives that we just don't do, because we do have irrational fears of things. And they come from a rational place. It's just that it becomes a thing. So yeah, everybody should get a therapist. It's really great. I love mine.
It's so good for you.
Yeah, exactly. $5 from Crystal B. Pretty much missed the whole show. Going to rewatch soon. What do I have to look forward to? Hashtag Team Lux. I mean, we had some good conversations today. There were some that were a little much, but yeah, I think it was a good show overall. You have a lot to look forward to.
It was very
You have
interesting,
surprises.
if nothing else. Yeah.
There's definitely some surprises along the way.
Yeah. $5 from Jamnico6. Thank you, says, so I can't say too much, but I'm currently in training for a new show about dragons. Hashtag dragons are friends. Hashtag epic universe. Hashtag Team Lux. I don't want to hear about it.
Oh my gosh.
If it's what I think it is, let a good movie be a good movie and stop trying to make TV shows and stop trying to make live action movies where you remake what was a good animated movie. I'm tired of it. But
Lux
I am
is
going
so
to use
spot
it
on
as an
today.
opportunity.
Dragons.
Thank you. I will use
I
it as an
know, but I
opportunity
like
to make
seeing the
money
cutie
though,
dragon.
because I will make a video about how to train your dragon when that movie comes out.
$10 from Eric Shimon. Save the dragons, leave them alone. So trying to rob and be destroyed, rob and destroyed them. Dragons are people, if not flesh and bone. They deserve their freedom and joy. Keep them soaring. Mark Gunn. All right, yeah, I love it.
That's fun. $10
Yeah.
from Alina says Stegosaurus is the best thagomizer for the win. MRAs need to realize that their problems are not feminism, it's our society's atomization, toxic culture, and lack of social safety nets. Yeah. So frequently
Facts.
they point this at women and say this is a problem that women have created. Yeah, I don't know. Also, I am just ideologically opposed to the idea that a man can just like decline to pay child support. So I mean, we're just like fundamentally on a different page. If you're saying like I should have the right to abdicate child support when it's like, yeah, but you had sex with a woman. So like I don't know where you get off thinking that you shouldn't have consequences and you're just going to shunt everything onto her. Like your choice in that situation is not to have sex with someone. You know, I don't know. Anyway, I was not
tough.
happy with him for saying that.
It's tough. It's real. Yeah, I hate it. Sucks. $5 to Mr. Bariqua. 10 Lux and Josie, Western Dragons or Eastern Dragons or both. Ooh, I say both. I think they're both cuties.
They have very
Eastern
different
Dragons,
places in a narrative.
They do though. They absolutely do. And so yeah, depending on the story, I'm down with both.
Yeah. I prefer aesthetically and the types of stories that get told. I tend to prefer Western Dragons. I think I just you know, they tend to represent like good luck and good fortune and stuff in Eastern stories. Like they're associated with wisdom and family history and stuff, whereas Western dragons have gone through many different permutations where often in a story they could represent greed, or they could represent pride, or they could represent an unstoppable natural force, or they could represent the foreign or the alien. So yeah, I mean, I just think that there's a lot of potential with the stories that you can tell with the ways in which dragons exist in symbology in Western depictions.
And you
so that's
call
what
me
I tend
a
to
nerd.
focus on. I don't need listen, I know what I am. I know what I am.
Yeah.
Can't
All
listen
right.
seriously
Is
with
that
the
the last
demon
super
wings on.
chat?
Sorry. I'm taking the seriousness out of
1
my
point.
commentary.
Look at
Ooh,
that. Very close. It was
it
very
was very
close.
close. Sad.
But a win is a win.
Excuse me.
Even
Right.
by 1 vote.
It's true.
Hashtag Team Josie coming in for a win again. I love you, all you Team Josies. I love you, all of you, every single one. Gets love.
We came very close.
Gender favorite dinosaur is the winning topic. So,
Okay, well,
Lux,
that's
if you are ready.
Yeah.
All right. Charging up the clock.
Yeah.
And 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, because we've known for a while that it's dumb to have gender on your license, right? It's like having your weight on your license. Like, you know, like what are we really accomplishing here? Who needs to know this information? Like your appearance could change from time to time. Maybe you go out to do drag with the boys and then you get pulled over and it doesn't match or whatever. It's like it's more of a big deal if you don't match the picture, right? But what's more important to you as a person, right? Everybody's like, gender is such a fundamental part of humanity and it's such a fundamental part of how we define ourselves. Whatever. Get out of here with that. I want to know. I need to know, as a matter of fact. What's your favorite dinosaur? Like, what better test? How better to test whether someone has stolen an ID than to be like, man, what's your favorite dinosaur? And I'm sitting there going, pterodactyl. And they're like, that's not a dinosaur. It's a stegosaurus. Anyway, what, you know, instead of asking me to read the number, like I don't have the number on my license memorized. This is a much better way to accurately determine whether it's my actual ID or not. Okay. And it tells you so much more about a person, because then you can know for sure whether that person is an obnoxious fucking nerd pedant who says things like pterosaurs don't count because it's non-avian dinosaur, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I just think that it would be much more revealing. It tells so much more about you as a person. You know, if you say stegosaur, then like, okay, we know that you're mentally in the level of like a 5-year-old. If you say T-Rex, we could probably guess that you're mentally about the same place as like an 11-year-old boy. That's just about where you're at mentally. And then we can proportionally load you with like the correct information. We can talk to you on your level, like you're a 10-year-old boy, because that's what you are. If you say T-Rex, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be so much better. And it's going to take up a bunch of space on the ID, so you can't even put your weight on there.
And we all know favorite dinosaurs are immutable and never changing.
It's never changed,
You know,
yeah.
And never can change. Also, you just created it, and we need a mug and a T-shirt for it. Doing drag with the boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was cracking up as everybody is like, drag with the boys. Like,
it was one of those where it's like, as I'm saying it, I'm like, that's a firecracker. That's hilarious.
it is so good. When you're on a Saturday night doing drag with the boys, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
I'm dead. I can't.
On that note, thank you everybody for joining us on the Transatlantic Call-In Show. Catch us next week. I'll be on with Ben, assuming that he's going to be here next week. Yeah, and you join the Patreon, because the Patreon is a place where you can get your name read out, or at least like listed out, and it gets you access to like secret stuff, like secret private stuff in the Discord and everything. So support the show directly. Make sure the producers are getting paid. Join the Patreon, and we will see you next week, or I'll see you next week.
It's super